Chapter 3388. The monster's head was not big, it was triangular, and its two eyes were also very small, as if it could not open them. In particular, the two eyes were far away from the top of its head, which seemed very uncoordinated. Although the monster's eyes were not big, what made Xiaohua puzzled was that when he was on guard, he could see the same surprise and shock in the monster's small eyes. The monster flew out of the passage and saw Xiaohua standing in front of it with the staff. Ayo! It let out a long roar, and its figure actually retreated, as if it was also avoiding Xiaohua. However, the monster had only retreated half a meter. Just as it was about to exit the tunnel, it seemed to have been stung by a scorpion. A layer of gray light flowed around its body, and its several-meter-long body suddenly turned into a sharp spike, charging toward Xiaohua. Xiaohua sneered and swept behind him with his divine sense. The strange insect had already stretched half of its body out of the void, so he raised the staff in his hand and shouted, "Evil creature, eat this Zhao's staff." Wu, the staff waved, stirring up the wind and clouds, and flew towards the monster with Xiaohua. But strangely, before he could make the wishful scepter bigger, the monster actually turned around and rushed toward the top of Xiaohua's head. This was really beyond Xiaohua's expectations. Although Xiaohua was puzzled, he was happy in his heart. The direction the monster was going was where the strange insect's head was, and in front of him was the passage left by the monster when it came in. If he flew into the passage and the strange insect was blocked by the monster, wouldn't he have a chance to live? After thinking about it, Xiaohua swung the wishful steel staff. Just like the monster, he urged the lightning escape to rush towards the passage. "Evil creature, where are you going?" Xiaohua had just flown half a foot when a loud voice came from the passage. Under the flash of golden light, another figure of several feet rushed out of the passage. Confucian cultivator. The figure of several feet in size had not yet appeared, but the voice of the inscription with the ancient charm fell into Xiaohua's ears. Xiaohua was overjoyed. It was really a feeling of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. Immediately, a strong man wearing a golden armor and standing on a cloud rushed out of the passage with a three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand. The strong man was 4 feet tall, with a purple gold crown on his head and a fist-sized pearl inlaid on the golden crown. Under the golden crown was a big bronze face with thick eyebrows and big eyes, a lion's nose and tiger's mouth. It was very mighty. On the 40 feet tall body, a glittering golden chainmail was very eye-catching. In front of the chainmail's head was a heart-protecting mirror that was a few feet in size. It glowed with a faint golden light, which was the convergence of thousands of inscriptions on the armor. In the middle of the chainmail was a chain belt that was coiled around the waist. The entire chain belt was in the shape of a dragon. The dragon's body protected the burly man's waist, and the ferocious dragon's head floated above the waist. Where the light flowed, the dragon's head faintly opened its mouth and roared. The lower half of the chainmail was thousands of floating clouds, which were also formed by the inscriptions on the armor. When the burly man flew, these floating clouds also moved, and layers of golden light protected the lower half of the burly man's body. Looking at the man's hand, there was a 3-pointed, double-edged blade that was also emitting a bronze luster. There was a trace of gray blood on the tip of the blade. If he was not mistaken, it was left behind by the monster that had just escaped. The strong man flew into the space and opened his huge eyes to look around. He immediately found something strange. A gaze swept over Xiaohua, and he called out strangely, "Thou art Buddhist sect fellow immortal? Why are you in the space node?" The strong man's tone was very contemptuous, and even had a trace of hostility. His huge eyes faintly carried vigilance. Xiaohua naturally knew that the strong man's target was the monster. It had nothing to do with him, so he did not say much. He casually waved his hand and flew toward the passage. "You?" The strong man slightly frowned, but his figure did not stop, as if he did not care about Xiaohua. He moved his gaze away from Xiaohua and looked at the distant monster and the strange insect that had just appeared. Ayo! At this time, the monster had already rushed between the strange insect and the strong man. It was roaring at the strange insect. The strange insect did not pay attention to it at first and flew toward Xiaohua. Moreover, it waved its hind legs and wanted to teleport. But the monster continued to roar, and the four-zhong tall, strong man chased after it. Even the cold light on the three-pointed double-edged sword attracted the strange insect's attention. Roar! Although the strange insect was small, its roar was very loud, not inferior to the monster's. After a few roars, the strange insect gave up on Xiaohua. With a stomp of its legs, its entire body disappeared. The monster suddenly turned around. Its body, which was several zhong long, seemed to have no bones. It was even more ferocious than the dark clouds covering the sky as it pounced toward the burly man. The strong man looked at the disappearance of the strange insect with a strange expression. Then, he used his huge eyes to sweep over Xiaohua, who was rushing toward the passage that was about to be sealed. He naturally understood the cause and effect of this. Seeing that the monster had unexpectedly counterattacked, the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand danced, and he also paid attention to the traces of the strange insect. At this moment, there was no one who understood the strange insect's trick more than Xiaohua. He had been paying attention to the strange insect all along. Now, seeing that the strange insect had actually abandoned him and surrounded the strong man with the monster, Xiaohua's heart trembled. Xiaohua was not clear about the strength of the strong man. However, the strength of the huge eyes technique was not inferior to his own divine sense. This meant that the strong man was at least a 5th-level essence energy martial grandmaster. Of course, Xiaohua also hoped that the strong man had the power to subdue dragons and tigers, and kill the strange insect and a monster one by one, so that he could escape. However, since the strange insect could abandon him to help the monster attack the human race, why would he abandon his own clansmen and only care about escaping? Thinking about what old monster Jifeng and Ao Shui said, the spirit of all living things was the demon race, Xiaohua's heart felt very uncomfortable. If he took advantage of the chaos to escape and built his life on the sacrifice of others, even if the strong man was a Confucian cultivator, Xiaohua would definitely not agree. Would that kind of Xiaohua still be Xiaohua? Without hesitation, Xiaohua immediately stopped flying and used the wind escape technique to fly towards the strong man. As he flew, he hurriedly transmitted his voice. "Fellow immortal, be careful about 4 feet below you." And the strong man stared blankly, clearly not expecting Xiaohua to turn around. He actually glanced at Xiaohua with some surprise. Seeing the strong man look at him, Xiaohua's heart thumped, knowing that the situation was bad. Clearly, although the strong man was vigilant, in his heart, he did not take the strange insect seriously. Xiaohua made a prompt decision and formed a hand seal with both hands. Rumble. The lightning attraction technique was displayed. Although the dark clouds didn't appear in the space, layers of lightning still appeared above the burly man's head and poured down like a waterfall towards the burly man's feet. The strong man was naturally shocked and raised his head in disbelief. At the same time, he raised the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, as if guarding against Xiaohua's sneak attack. At the same time the strong man raised his head, 2 tentacles stretched out from the place where the lightning fell. As soon as the tentacles touched the lightning, they immediately trembled, then hastily retracted and disappeared. Hiss! The strong man sucked in a breath of cold air. He really did not expect that in just the blink of an eye, the strange insect would actually catch up to him. If it were not for Xiaohua's warning and Xiaohua's lightning manipulation technique, he feared that he would have suffered a big loss. Moreover, the strong man also clearly saw that although Xiaohua's lightning manipulation technique was powerful, when it hit the strange insect's tentacles, the tentacles only trembled for a moment and immediately retracted. In other words, the strange insect was not afraid of the lightning strike that even he was afraid of. If the tentacles really succeeded in sneak attacking him, what would his end be? The strong man shuddered. Looking at the strange insect that attacked the strong man from the other side, when the lightning was produced, it also stopped abruptly. Its upright body also flickered with a gray brilliance, as if it was covered in a layer of oily light. Dozens of lightning bolts fell, but they did not stop on the strange insect's skin and directly slid down, not harming a single hair on the strange insect. Roar! The first wave of lightning poured down, but before Xiao Hua could activate the lightning manipulation technique a second time, a deafening sound resounded in the entire space. Xiao Hua frowned and felt a wave of dizziness in his mind. He immediately activated God's traction and blocked this unexpected sound attack. The strong man was also caught unprepared. His 40-feet-long bronze-colored body slightly swayed, and then, without waiting for Xiao Hua's warning, the three-pointed, double-edged sword drew a cold light in the air and suddenly stabbed into the air. Come! With a muffled sound, a ripple appeared in the air, and the strange insect's figure was revealed. The three-pointed, double-edged sword pierced the back of the strange insect. The strange insect tried its best to twist, but for a while, it could not break free. Hiss! Seeing this, Xiao Hua could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. His eyes were drooling as he looked at the majestic weapon. Fellow immortal, be careful of the weapon. Suddenly, Xiao Hua thought of something and hurriedly reminded. Unfortunately, just as Xiao Hua's words were shouted, the strange insect's hind legs suddenly crossed in midair and cut on the back of the three-pointed, double-edged sword. Zalala! After a disgusting sound that made people's skin crawl, the strange insect took advantage of the momentum to escape from the tip of the sword and left a shallow mark on the sword. Damn it! The strong man roared. Apparently, he was also extremely distressed. He urged the clouds to dance and stabbed the strange insect again. Seeing that the strong man was concentrating on dealing with the strange insect and ignoring the restless monster, Xiao Hua did not know what the strong man was thinking. He opened his hand and took the wishful staff in his hand and shouted, "Grow, grow, 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 grow." As the wishful staff grew longer, Xiao Hua's heavenly law embodiment technique and Vajradharma body were also displayed. A Buddhist Vajra with a height of 5 feet and a diameter of a bowl appeared in the air. Woo! The tip of the wishful staff made a whimpering sound, and the area where the monster was located was shrouded by the wind of the staff. When a monster saw this, instead of retreating, it moved forward. With a kick of its hind legs, its whole body turned into a gray color and rushed toward the wishful staff. Chapter 3389. Granny, how did these monsters become spirits? They are even more cunning than the human race. Xiao Hua secretly cursed in his heart. The monster was so direct that his wishful steel rod did not completely fall down. The weight of the wishful steel rod was much lighter than when it fell down. The monster's action was to seize a slight opportunity. With a muffled sound, the wishful steel staff hit the back of the monster, which was also sent by the monster. Xiao Hua's arms trembled, and then he saw the monster's oily body flash. His wishful steel staff once again slipped from the monster's skin. Moreover, Xiao Hua could clearly see that when the wishful steel staff slipped, the muscles under the monster's oily skin were trembling rapidly. It was not so much fear, but more like it was unloading the force. Immortal friend, the strong man's very majestic voice came. This beast is called Penetrating Void. Not only can it walk freely in the void, but the surface of its body is also covered with a strange oil. This oil is slippery and is what this beast relies on to walk in the void. If it were not for the weapon that can tear the void, I am afraid it would not be easy to deal with. Granny, I'll let you hide. I'll let you hide. Xiao Hua listened to the strong man's reminder and then looked at the strong man who was fighting with the strange insect. He was far less embarrassed than himself. The Vajra Dharmakaya of the size of 5 feet madly swung the wishful steel staff in the air, displaying the Tong Tian staff technique. The staff was faster than the previous one, and the staff chased after the monster to hit it. At first, the monster was still able to resist. Like a lump of oily dough, it allowed Xiao Hua to beat it. But after a long time, Xiao Hua's strength did not seem to be exhausted. At first, the monster was obviously unable to endure. Seeing Xiao Hua's staff strike again, the monster dodged and disappeared. Pooh! The sound was much louder than before. Immediately after, the monster let out a miserable cry and looked towards the direction of the strange insect. Roar! At the same time, the strange insect was afraid of the strong man's weapon. It hid in the void several times to sneak attack the strong man, but it was hit by the strong man's three-pointed double-edged sword. It was a little anxious. Now that it heard the monster's screams, it became even more furious. With a loud roar, its two hind legs crossed in the air at the same time, like two long swords slashing at the strong man's body. Ha! A mere bug dares to be arrogant in front of this true lord. The burly man laughed and waved the three-pointed, double-edged sword in the air. Then he stretched out his left hand. Buzz! The entire space vibrated and countless clouds appeared out of thin air. Then the burly man clenched his left hand into a fist and punched at the two hind legs of the strange insect. Following the burly man's fist, the countless clouds that had just appeared turned into thousands of noble chi, sweeping up hurricanes, forming a vast chi pillar that attacked the strange insect from all directions. Shit! Xiaohua was shocked again. He couldn't be bothered to kill the monster and hurriedly sent a voice transmission. Fellow immortal, be careful. This bug can devour the essence energy of heaven and earth. The brawny man was shocked and hurriedly tried to withdraw his fist, but how could he stop now? Rumble. Hundreds of chi pillars comparable to Xiaohua's thunder-attracting technique descended from the sky and blasted towards the strange insect. The body of the strange insect rolled continuously under this intense bombardment. Seeing the strange insect like this, the brawny man coldly snorted, looking rather obstinate and self-opinionated. However, after a moment, although the strange insect was still rolling within the chi pillars and looked extremely distressed, its originally 2 feet long shell actually slowly expanded until it was 4 or 5 feet long. Xiaohua's mouth was somewhat bitter. This strange insect was really cunning. When it was fighting with the brawny man, it didn't reveal the slightest ability to devour the essence energy of heaven and earth. It had been hiding until now. The brawny man's move was indeed powerful, but it had also fed the strange insect until it was full. Humans are still inferior to insects. When did the world become so strange? Xiaohua sighed and thought with emotion. If this Xiao didn't have some misgivings about this Confucian cultivator, I'm afraid I would have already told him about the abilities of this strange insect. Why would I have let this Confucian cultivator enter the trap? And if this Confucian cultivator had told this Xiao everything about this strange insect, I'm afraid this Xiao wouldn't have to waste so much effort, right? Fellow immortal, thinking of this, Xiaohua hurriedly sent a sound transmission. Don't worry, first stall this insect. Wait until I kill this beast, then we'll work together to kill this insect. The brawny man looked up and down at Xiaohua's Dharma body, which was even larger than his own, and a trace of a sneer appeared on his face. Why don't you deal with this insect and let me kill this monster? It seems like this strange insect was originally chasing you to kill you, right? Fellow immortal, Xiaohua didn't hide anything and hurriedly explained, my methods mostly use the essence energy of heaven and earth. The weapon in my hand can't cause the strange insect to have any misgivings, so I can't stall this strange insect as easily as fellow immortal. This monster should be fellow immortal's target, right? Fellow immortal can rest assured. Even if I kill this beast, it will belong to fellow immortal. I don't want a single strand of hair. Xiaohua said very sincerely, but the brawny man was still somewhat hesitant. When did your Buddhist sect use the essence energy of heaven and earth? Xiaohua suddenly understood. He touched his bald head and said with a smile, I am Tao sect Xiaohua, not a Buddhist sect disciple. It's just that I encountered danger in the void passage, so the hair on my head no longer exists. Tao sect? The brawny man was slightly stunned. Soon after, a trace of understanding appeared in his eyes. He nodded and said, so what you used just now was Tao sect's lightning attracting technique. Be careful. At this moment, The strange insect had already stopped rolling in the righteous chi. Its body, which was close to 10 feet long, streaked across the sky like a gray shadow and once again flew towards the brawny man. I am Confucian cultivator Sun Jian. That brawny man already knew how powerful the strange insect was. How could he still dare to be negligent? His two hands brandished the three-pointed, double-edged blade, blocking the strange insect. He also hurriedly said, "Not only does the penetrating void beast skin and flesh have a rare toughness that is hard to break, its eyes even have the penetrating void eye, which can break open the void. If the penetrating void beast attacks with this, it will be even more powerful. If not for the penetrating void divine weapon, any defense would be unable to withstand a single blow. Fortunately, this beast has already used the penetrating void eye just now. It will need some time before it can use it again. You could try your best to find a way to kill this beast during this time." Although the brawny man spoke somewhat vaguely, Xiaohua had already understood that this Confucian cultivator Sun Jian had indeed utterly defeated the penetrating void beast by relying on the three-pointed, double-edged blade in his hand. He didn't have such a divine weapon, so he probably had to think of another way. If it was a method to kill this beast, the first thing Xiaohua thought of was the soul execution origin light. That strange insect was very peculiar. It seemed to have no soul and was unable to have its mind pinned down by the soul execution origin light. This penetrating void beast might not be the same, as long as it was pinned down by the soul execution origin light. Even if the penetrating void beast skin and flesh were strange, it would probably still be killed by the soul execution origin light. But the problem was that the soul execution origin light was Xiaohua's killer. Xiaohua didn't want to reveal it to outsiders. Moreover, the soul execution origin light's sharpness seemed to be insufficient to break open the void. Xiaohua also didn't have the confidence to truly kill the penetrating void beast. Thinking of sharpness, Xiaohua naturally thought of the sword light in his middle dantian. The 9 flying swords transformed from sword chi should be the sharpest weapon in Xiaohua's hands right now. But obviously, these 9 swords weren't divine weapons. Even if they were used, they wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. Moreover, his Confucian cultivator's cultivation was really too shallow. There was no need to make a fool of himself in front of this 5th-level essence, energy, great grandmaster. Forget it. Xiaohua's mind spun a few thoughts. The wishful staff in his hand once again made that beast stagger a few times. Xiaohua made a decision. Or should I use the sword gourd? Let's kill this beast first. Thinking of this, Xiaohua flung his hand and used the Yuanying's hand. He prepared to seal the penetrating void beast's surroundings in preparation for the sword gourd. Who would have thought that just as the Yuanying's hand was used, the penetrating void beast's body immediately flashed with a faint gray brilliance. A kind of slippery feeling transmitted from the Yuanying's hand. The space around the penetrating void beast seemed to have been sealed, but in this space, the penetrating void beast was still twisting like a loach. So much so that the top of the penetrating void beast's head flashed with a black and white light. An inch-long sharp spike suddenly emerged. An ice-cold feeling that was even more painful than the sharp spike transmitted from Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace. Powerful, Xiaohua sensed that the innate divine restriction outside his Naiwan Palace was suffused with a golden light. He knew that this penetrating void beast actually had an attack similar to a soul spike. He couldn't help but look at this penetrating void beast in a new light. Previously, when he saw this monster being chased into a sorry state by Sun Jian, and when he didn't see how powerful it was after fighting with it for so long, he had already felt contempt for it. Now, it seemed that a monster that could break through the void was definitely not as simple as he thought. Although the spike only hit the Yuanying's hand, it could still pierce into the Naiwan Palace through the Yuanying's divine sense. It was not inferior to his own soul spike. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they would have been injured. It would be normal even if they died. It isn't polite to come and go. Xiaohua sneered and immediately used the soul spike technique. This soul spike technique was originally very powerful with the help of the sun shrouding art. Now that Xiao Hua had just advanced to the Yuanying realm, although his realm was not stable, the pressure and divine sense of the Yuanying realm had risen. When he used it, even gods and ghosts would be unable to escape. The spike that had just grown out of the penetrating void beast flashed with a strong black and white light and rapidly shrank. Its small head shook like a rattle drum. The unstable space within a few dozen feet of the penetrating void beast also shook violently. Layers of ripples gradually formed in the void. Buzz buzz. Just when Xiao Hua was confident in his victory and pondered about what method he should use to kill this void-penetrating beast, there was a sound that sounded like a group of mountains flapping their wings. Not only did the spatial fluctuation caused by the void-penetrating beast stop spreading in all directions, it instead suddenly contracted. In a few breaths, it seeped into the void-penetrating beast's body like flowing water. At the same time, the sharp spike that had just retracted suddenly extended out from the top of the void-penetrating beast's head, and an extremely brilliant black and white brilliance shot towards Xiao Hua's heart. "Be careful, fellow immortal, this is the penetrating void eye." Sun Jian actually still had energy left and hurriedly warned. Chapter 3390. The black and white brilliance, known as the penetrating void, I was really fast. By the time Xiao Hua noticed it, it had already hit Xiao Hua's heart. Seeing that it was about to touch the clothes that Xiao Hua had taken out in a hurry, Xiao Hua was shocked. He hurriedly used the ethereal steps and the wind escape technique. An afterimage appeared in place, and Xiao Hua's figure barely dodged to the side. The black and white brilliance passed through Xiao Hua's afterimage and went straight into the void. Cold sweat broke out on Xiao Hua's head. He was secretly lucky to escape the attack. But immediately after, a sharp pain unexpectedly came from Xiao Hua's heart. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed and involuntarily cried out, How is this possible? I have clearly dodged it. Fly 10 feet higher." Sun Jian's stern reminder sounded in Xiao Hua's ears like a gong. Xiao Hua did not hesitate and flew into the sky. He flew not only 10 feet, but more than 50 feet. Just as he steadied himself in the air, a black and white beam of light, as thick as a bowl, shot out from the void behind his back. Xiao Hua hurriedly accelerated the operation of the blood drop paradise in his body to eliminate the danger of the penetrating void beast's attack. On the one hand, he was ready to take out the sword gourd. The defense of this void-penetrating beast was impeccable. His wishful steel staff could only injure it, but it was difficult to kill it in one blow. The attack of the void-penetrating beast was so strange. Not only could it attack the entity through the virtual shadow, but it could also turn back through the void. If he fought for a long time, although he might not die, he would definitely suffer. He had just formed his nascent soul, and his realm was not stable. If he was injured, it would definitely have a great impact on his Dao foundation. Thinking about it, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the sword gourd was about to attack. However, at this moment, something that shocked Xiao Hua happened once again. The void-penetrating beast was even more nimble than a swimming fish as it soared into the sky. The black and white brilliance that was as thick as the mouth of a bull accurately struck between its eyes. Pop! There was the sound of a bubble bursting. Although this sound was very soft, it caused the entire space to tremble slightly. After that, an eye the size of a bull suddenly opened between the void-penetrating beast's eyes as the black and white light hit it. His eyes were a mixture of grayish-white colors. Pieces of white were like white clouds floating in the grayish-white sky. Every piece of white cloud seemed to be the most precious thing in the world. Xiao Hua's gaze was instantly attracted. Xiao Hua's eyes were completely grayish-white. "Hey, be careful, fellow Taoist. This is the second attack of the void-piercing eye." Just as Xiao Hua's gaze fell on the third eye of the void-penetrating beast, the soul cultivator Xiao Hua's sigh was like a sudden clap of thunder that woke Xiao Hua up. Void-penetrating eye? Void-penetrating beast. Xiao Hua came back to his senses at once as he suddenly realized something. The moment Xiao Hua turned his eyes, a silver-white brilliance shot out even more rapidly than the black-white brilliance. Even the space between Xiaohua and the void-penetrating beast started to tremble intensely because of this silver-white brilliance. Dharma Eye? Xiaohua wasn't familiar with the black-white brilliance, but Xiaohua was extremely familiar with this silver-white brilliance. Wasn't it just an ordinary delusion breaker Dharma Eye and Goldie's third eye Silverlight? Of course, the void-penetrating bee's silver light was clearly much more powerful than Xiaohua's delusion breaker Dharma Eye's silver light. Even if Xiaohua had the time to open his Dharma Eye, he might not necessarily be able to compete with the void-penetrating beast in terms of the power of the silver-white brilliance. Moreover, at this moment, that silver-white brilliance had already enveloped Xiaohua. Even if Xiaohua used the wind escape technique to dodge, it was unlikely that he would be able to escape unscathed. However, at such a critical moment, Xiaohua was so calm that it was frightening. That deathly white face of his actually revealed a trace of a smile. He was simply more confident than someone who had a card up his sleeve. Xiaohua didn't use any divine ability. He merely stretched out his left hand and held it flat in front of his chest. That silver-white brilliance that shook the space within a range of several zhang obediently fell into Xiaohua's left palm like a chick returning to its nest. Seeing that the brilliance that filled the sky was annihilated by Xiaohua's palm, Sun Jian's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. What's more, when that silver-white brilliance fell into Xiaohua's palm, that void-penetrating beast seemed to have lost its essence. It softly collapsed in midair, unexpectedly without any power to resist. Immortal! Fellow immortal! Sun Jian was flabbergasted. He didn't have time to think about what kind of divine ability Xiaohua had used. He suddenly came to a realization. A kind of ecstasy rushed into his heart, and he shouted, "Quick! You quickly come and replace me." Xiaohua understood that Sun Jian wanted him to deal with the strange insect while he came to kill the void-penetrating beast. Okay. Xiaohua agreed, almost without hesitation. He waved the wishful staff in his hand and was about to fly over. However, before Sun Jian and Xiaohua could exchange places, that strange insect let out a strange "oh," and its entire body swelled up again. With a kick of its hind legs, it actually wanted to rush to the void-penetrating beast in front of Sun Jian to save it. It's too late. Sun Jian instantly weighed the pros and cons and said anxiously, "Fellow immortal, take this beast first." Okay. Xiaohua frowned. Seeing that the strange insect was about to teleport away, he hurriedly swept the void-penetrating beast with his mind. The behemoth of several zhang in size instantly fell into his space. Seeing that Xiaohua was so decisive and took the void-penetrating beast so nimbly, Sun Jian couldn't help but have a trace of doubt in his heart. After all, this void-penetrating beast was his main purpose in entering the space node this time, and he had spent a lot of energy to enter this time. Now that the strange beast was defeated by him, but it was taken by a cultivator he didn't know. Moreover, it was a Taoist cultivator. Whether he could get it back and what price he had to pay to get it back had become a big problem. However, just as he had doubts, the strange insect finally showed its power. The strange insect's body suddenly spewed out a gray mist. This gray mist was extremely viscous. As soon as it fell into the void, part of it evaporated and disappeared, while the other part covered the strange insect's body. Fellow immortal, this strange insect. Sun Jian had a bad feeling in his heart. He hurriedly looked at Xiaohua, expecting Xiaohua to give a definite answer. Unfortunately, Xiaohua had never seen the strange insect act like this. He was also shocked. He waved the wishful staff in his hand and shouted, "Fellow immortal son, this is the first time I have encountered this strange insect. I don't know its origin. Now you and I have to work together without any gaps. This void-penetrating beast is useless to this little one, as long as this strange insect. No, as long as you and I can escape with our lives, this little one can immediately give the void-penetrating beast to you." Escape? When Sun Jian heard this, his face unconsciously showed arrogance. He waved the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand and said coldly, "How can I escape when dealing with an insect? Although we are inside the space node, if others know about it, where will my face go? You don't have to say more. We will work together to kill this strange insect." Space node? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned, and then he understood that this spatial node was probably another name for spatial veins. However, he still felt disdain towards Sun Jian's pride and face. "You're about to lose your life, so what face is there to talk about?" Unfortunately, Xiao Hua looked around and saw that the previous passage had been closed. Although the space was large, with his understanding of the strange insect, he was afraid that he would not be able to escape the pursuit of the strange insect. He could only fight the enemy together with Sun Jian. Xiao Hua had just flown to the other side of the strange insect when a sharp sound of wind filled the entire space. Behind the gray fog, the strange insect's body had doubled in size. It was already close to 3 zhang tall. Moreover, there were crescent-shaped grooves all over the strange insect's body. The sharp and ear-piercing sound of wind came from those grooves. Along with the sound of the wind, waves of heaven and earth yuan qi fell into the grooves. The strange insect's body gradually expanded again. As time passed, the suction force in the groove became stronger and stronger. Not only did the entire space shake, even Xiao Hua and Sun Wu's Dharmakayas, which were dozens of feet in size, could not stand still. Furthermore, an extremely unfamiliar aura, which was similar to pressure or primordial thought, was being emitted from the strange insect. Xiao Hua could feel his own divine thought, and even the Buddha's Saraira could not help but jump out of his Niwen palace and pounce towards that aura. Oh no, Xiao Hua had never encountered such a strange attack. The innate divine restriction in his Niwen palace flashed with golden light and protected the Buddha Saraira with his divine sense. Looking at Sun Jian, there was also shock on his face. Golden light flashed around his body. Obviously, he was also resisting. Moo! The strange insect spread its wings and let out a moo like a cow. It was unknown whether the sound came from the mouth of the strange insect or from its wings. Similarly, 2 faintly discernible phantoms flew out from the strange insect's wings and pounced toward Xiao Hua and Sun Jian at the same time. Not waiting for the illusory figure to get close, a burst of indescribable coldness appeared around Xiao Hua. Wisps of ice were actually formed in the air, and layers of white frost instantly appeared on Xiao Hua's bald head. That coldness seemed to be able to freeze his bones. Xiao Hua, who had not known the cold for a long time, could not help but shiver. Looking at the strange insect's malevolent shadow pouncing towards him, Xiao Hua suddenly smiled coldly. That smile was even colder than the strange insect's shadow. This was because between Xiao Hua's eyebrows, a dark green light flashed. The 2 small characters Thunder and Lightning appeared out of thin air. Then, a wave of lightning enveloped the space between Xiao Hua and the strange insect. With a kacha sound, it landed on the strange insect's shadow. Moo! The strange insect's shadow was obviously caught unprepared. Even Xiao Hua's attack was beyond its expectations. With just a layer of lightning, more than half of the strange insect's shadow was eliminated. The strange insect's shadow no longer dared to move forward. For the first time, it panicked and fled in front of Xiao Hua. However, just as the strange insect retreated, Xiao Hua's second wave of lightning ruthlessly poured down. The originally incomplete shadow was instantly destroyed by Xiao Hua. Seeing that his attack had succeeded, Xiao Hua was immediately filled with courage. Previously, this strange insect was like a thorny hedgehog. Xiao Hua wanted to eat it, but he did not dare to open his mouth. Now that he finally had a breakthrough, it seemed that the soul cultivation technique was also effective against this strange insect. His lightning and thunder technique was enough to kill this strange insect. Chapter 33:91. Looking at Sun Jian in the distance, he was somewhat different from Xiao Hua. Seeing the shadow of the strange insect pouncing over, he suddenly slashed with the 3-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, directly chopping at the shadow. What was really surprising was that the shadow actually split into two pieces at the tip of the three-pointed, double-edged sword. However, at the corner of Sun Jian's mouth, before that sneer could appear, the two pieces of the shadow turned into two different shadows and continued to pounce on Sun Jian's body without slowing down. Oomph! Sun Jian sneered again, not dodging at all. Golden light flowed around his body like a golden mountain. When the shadow pounced on the golden light, it let out a sizzling sound, and in a moment, more than half of it melted away. Illo! The strange insect finally let out a roar, and the shadow turned into a wind. Without waiting for Sun Jian to attack further, it rushed into the strange insect's body, and the suction force of the crescent moon-like groove increased again. Since you're so greedy, I'll let you eat to your heart's content. Sun Jian seemed to have thought of something, and with a raise of his hand, the noble qi turned into a pillar of qi and bombarded the strange insect. The huge roar even made Xiao Hua look askance. He really didn't expect that the punches and kicks of Confucian cultivators could reach such a level. Sun Jian, Xiao Hua suddenly woke up. The Confucian military school seems to have been founded by Sun Wu, Old Master's son, right? According to Fu Jiwen, the Confucian scholars can command the wind and clouds, and the martial artists of the military school can also throw the wind and clouds into chaos with their punches and kicks. This Sun Jian might be a descendant of the military school. Seeing the huge wave of air rushing into the strange insect's body, the strange insect swelled up like a balloon. Its body grew bigger and bigger, and its saw-like tentacles and bloody mouth exuded a strange bloodthirsty aura. In particular, as the strange insect's body grew bigger, its terrifying aura also rapidly increased. According to Xiao Hua's estimation, in the time it took to eat a meal, this aura would definitely surpass his own pressure. Fellow immortal Xiao, Sun Jian urged the noble qi to pour into the strange insect's body, and said, "This insect is extremely powerful, and its defense is even stronger than the void-penetrating beast. Although my weapon can injure this insect, it can't completely kill it. Furthermore, I've already thought about it for a long time, and I don't think any of my abilities can completely restrain this insect. From what I can see, this insect is able to pass through the void like the void-penetrating beast, and it even has the ability to teleport. Even if we try to escape, I'm afraid we won't be able to. The only thing we can do now is to fight it to the death." "That's exactly what I was thinking." Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. However, it seems that fellow immortal Sun wants to use his noble qi to make the strange insect explode, right? This road doesn't seem to be accessible. It's impossible for the noble spirit to make the insect explode, but if the noble spirit were to explode inside the insect's body, would I be able to help it from the outside? Sun Jian seemed to have a bamboo shoot in his chest. He said with a smile, but the smile on his bronze face looked a little strange. "I understand." Xiao Huan nodded slightly. He didn't know what method Sun Jian had to make the massive amount of righteous qi explode in the strange insect's body, but Sun Jian's idea was indeed the only way. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and reminded, "What if I also gather some heaven-earth yuan qi for it?" "Do as you wish." Sun Jian smiled faintly. "Perhaps it's better than nothing?" "All right." Xiao Hua also smiled. He rubbed his hands together, and countless rays of light appeared in his palms. When Xiao Hua waved his hands, bursts of heavenly thunder poured into the space like a torrential downpour. They were even denser than hail as they smashed into the strange insect. "Oh!" Sun Jian raised his eyebrows. He was clearly a little surprised. Although Xiao Hua's lightning thunder technique was strange, its power and momentum were really small, so Sun Jian didn't pay attention to it at all. However, this lightning attraction technique actually shook the entire space. It was no wonder Sun Jian had a whole new level of respect for it. However, Sun Jian clearly had some foundation. He only raised his eyebrows, and the surprise only lasted for a moment before he focused on urging the noble spirit. In fact, it wasn't just Sun Jian who was surprised. Even Xiao Hua himself was greatly surprised. Before he reached nascent soul, Xiao Hua still had to form hand seals, and the male and female lightning beast cores in his body also had to respond. Now, he didn't need to form any seals at all. It was as if the lightning in the sky was his, and he could take it down with a wave of his hand. Could it be that my nascent soul stage is different? The male and female lightning beast cores have already fused with my nascent soul. My nascent soul is already able to completely sense lightning. Xiao Hua secretly pondered. He knew that a cultivator's nascent soul could directly communicate with the world and use the origin energy of the world. However, there was a limit to this communication. It also had to rely on the cultivation of the nascent soul to gradually obtain it. How could it be like him, who had just reached the nascent soul stage and could freely control lightning? At this moment, he looked at his dantian and saw that the tiny nascent soul that was exactly the same as him was no longer fearful. It gritted its teeth and waved its tiny hands and feet like him, wishing it could pull down the thundercloud from the 9 heavens and smash the strange insect that had scared him to death in an instant. Oh! Feeling the nascent soul's anger and hatred, Xiao Hua suddenly understood. After nascent soul cultivator reached the nascent soul stage, they would only have one nascent soul. After releasing the nascent soul would be placed in the nascent soul. Their own physical body would be in an awkward state where no one could control it. Of course, there were also some cultivators who had secret techniques that allowed them to control their physical body for a short period of time. It was just like when Taoist Jing Si was chasing him. Taoist Jing Si controlled her nascent soul to use a teleportation technique to attack him while also controlling her physical body to fly in the air. Other people didn't have a second nascent soul, but Xiao Hua himself had one. Not to mention a second nascent soul, even a third nascent soul, a fourth nascent soul, even a 10th nascent soul had one. Thinking about how the green-robed Xiao Hua was muttering that he didn't have a suitable body to leave the space. This nascent soul, wasn't it tailor-made for these nascent souls? If it was possible, wouldn't Xiao Hua's several nascent souls be able to use this nascent soul as a body and come out every day to be free and unfettered for a while? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua actually beamed with joy. Fellow Taoist Xiao, put in more effort. At this moment, although Sun Jian didn't know why Xiao Hua suddenly laughed, his heart was as calm as Xiao Hua's. He didn't forget to remind him as he looked at the strange insect that was expanding like a balloon. Hearing this, Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist son, rest assured. This Xiao doesn't have any other magical abilities, but this lightning-attracting technique can fill me up. Let's see how this Xiao will raise this strange insect." As he said this, another wave of lightning easily descended. Good. Sun Jian was overjoyed. He punched out, and the same dozens of qi pillars shot towards the strange insect. Countless waves of qi rolled around the strange insect's body, and countless lightning crackled. Bursts of gray light flickered, as if it was about to lose control of the light. Therefore, Sun Jian touched his chest and transmitted his voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, looking at the strange insect situation, I'm afraid it's about time. This one will trigger the righteous qi inside the strange insect's body. If your excellency has any method to detonate the lightning, that would be the best." Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. He understood in his heart that the current him might be able to detonate the lightning, but the lightning that was still absorbed by the strange insect's body was probably no longer lightning. How could he still control it? If there are still some fire talismans in the space, I can give it a try. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua's heart suddenly moved. He opened his mouth and spat out a wisp of spiritual fire. Along with Xiao Hua's divine fire art, the spiritual fire rushed into the void like a lively little bird and followed the lightning towards the strange insect. Xiao Hua was most likely the most familiar with this kind of sneaky person who hid the spiritual fire. However, just as Xiao Hua released the spiritual fire, a misty green light flashed in front of his eyes. It was precisely from Sun Jian's hand. Kunlun. Kunlun mirror? Xiao Hua looked at the familiar light, and shock appeared in his eyes. He almost blurted out, "That's right, Sun Jian's hand was holding a treasured mirror." It was the Kunlun mirror that Xiaohua was familiar with. It was almost the same as the icy mirror in Xiaohua's space. How could there be another Kunlun mirror? Xiaohua's heart was somewhat crazy. His own icy mirror was still incomplete. He didn't expect that a complete Kunlun mirror had already appeared in this unfamiliar hidden immortal continent. He saw Sun Jian holding the Kunlun mirror in his hand, and his hand formed a seemingly right but actually wrong seal. Several streams of righteous qi rushed into the Kunlun mirror, and the Kunlun mirror was suffused with a faint clear light. Then, that clear light, under Sun Jian's control, turned into a beam of light and rushed towards the strange insect. The beam of light was very strange. After rushing out of the Kunlun mirror for more than half a foot, it immediately disappeared. Looking at Sun Jian again, he threw the Kunlun mirror in his hand into the air and raised the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand high into the sky. A burst of ka-ka-kung sounds came from his body, and the size of his Dharma body increased by more than 10 feet. Moreover, the golden light around his body became even brighter. Kill! Sun Jian stepped on the auspicious cloud and rushed towards the strange insect with the three-pointed double-edged sword. Buzz! The strange insect flapped its wings, and countless light shadows rushed out of the strange insect's body, wanting to block Sun Jian. However, those light shadows turned into fireflies under the three-pointed double-edged sword. Ayo! The strange insect roared and flew towards the three-pointed double-edged sword. One of its hind legs drew a line in the air, blocking the three-pointed double-edged sword. Unexpectedly, it made a golden sound. Sun Jian seemed to be defeated. His figure staggered, and the strange insect's sawtooth mouth took advantage of the situation to bite one of Sun Jian's arms. Not good. Xiaohua was shocked when he saw this. With a wave of his hands, he raised the wishful staff and smashed it towards the back of the strange insect. Kill! Sun Jian's voice was like spring thunder, and the golden light on his left arm flashed. The strange insect's sawtooth mouth couldn't bite him, and Sun Jian took advantage of the situation to swing his right hand, and the three-pointed double-edged sword was inserted into the back of the strange insect. Shwa! The three-pointed double-edged sword flashed with golden light, and a deep crack immediately appeared on the back of the strange insect. At the same time, a ray of clear light burst out from the strange insect's body, and the strange insect's body expanded rapidly. Chapter 3392. Pong! With a loud bang, Xiaohua's wishful steel staff also arrived and smashed a large part of the strange insect's back. However, the gray mist that had previously covered the strange insect's body was now rising again. The strange insect's body fluctuated rapidly in the mist, sometimes big and sometimes small. As the strange insect's mist rapidly retreated into its body, the clear light was gradually obscured, and the scars of the three-pointed, double-edged sword slowly disappeared. When Sun Jian saw this, his eyes flashed with extreme panic. No one knew the power of the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, and no one knew the power of the Kunlun mirror. These two treasures together could not kill the strange insect. How many methods in the world could threaten this strange insect? Just as Sun Jian was panicking, Xiaohua's eyes narrowed slightly, and the wishful steel staff in his hand quietly retracted. This was because he had already seen that the spirit fire that had just been sent into the air was sucked into the crescent-shaped groove by the strange insect, along with a few strands of lightning. Fellow immortal Xiao. Sun Jian's voice sounded in Xiaohua's ear, and his tone was very bitter. This son said too much. This strange insect is too powerful. I'm afraid it's an alien species. And I should make other plans. While this strange insect has not yet completely refined the noble qi in its body. Right when Sun Wu hung his head dejectedly and was about to discuss how to escape with Xiaohua, a rumbling sound suddenly resounded from within the strange insect's body. The strange insect's body instantly expanded to a size of around 15 meters, and then the gray mist around it expanded even more before shrinking to a size of around 10 meters. But right after that, the strange insect's body expanded once more. And then there was no more. A spark was produced in the mouth of the strange insect, and the entire body of the strange insect was no longer under its control. It suddenly grew to the size of 100 feet. Pong! With a loud sound, the strange insect's body completely burst open, and countless flames rushed out of the strange insect's body. The power of the strange insect's explosion was not great, but the strange thing was that the entire space trembled at an extremely fast speed, and the four corners of the space flashed with a dark brilliance. The dark brilliance quickly dissipated, and the light of the entire space gradually dimmed. "Go!" Sun Jian roared first. "This place is about to collapse. Fellow immortal Shao, please follow the sun out. If you are not careful, you will be implicated by the collapse into the void. I'm afraid it will be difficult to return to the space node." All right. Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense, but he didn't find any strange insect's soul essence. Knowing that he had indeed killed this strange insect, he didn't hesitate to agree and flew up with Sun Jian. But just as Xiao Hua was about to fly up, a strange feeling suddenly emerged from his heart. Xiao Hua almost instantly shouted, "Fellow immortal son, be careful." Then his entire body abruptly flew backward. Even as he was flying, his entire waist was also rapidly leaning backwards. When Sun Jian saw Xiao Hua's sudden change, his complexion changed greatly. He thought that Xiao Hua wanted to take his void-penetrating beast and flee. Unconsciously, he swung the three-pointed, double-edged blade in his hand. Just as he was about to give chase, before Sun Jian's figure could fly, a loud sound rang out. A huge force came from the three-pointed, double-edged blade. Sun Jian's right arm went numb, and he almost couldn't hold the weapon in his hand. When he took a closer look, he found that one of the legs of the insect that had just exploded was stuck in his three-pointed, double-edged sword. Hiss! Sun Jian sucked in a breath of cold air. A feeling of surviving a disaster arose spontaneously. The appearance of his hind leg was so strange that he couldn't detect it at all. If it weren't for Xiao Hua's warning, he was afraid that he would have been stabbed by this hind leg. Even if he didn't die here, the injury he received would certainly be heavy. Thinking about his guess about Xiao Hua just now, Sun Jian's face unconsciously became slightly hot. At this moment, Xiao Hua also saw the result. The other hind leg of the strange insect also stretched out from the void and flew past Xiao Hua's lying chest. Xiao Hua's eyes were sharp and his hands were nimble. He raised his hand and used the heaven and earth sleeve technique to take this object into space. Xiao Hua's figure didn't change, and his divine sense swept out once more. Meanwhile, Sun Jian opened his eyes, and a faint golden brilliance flashed out from his eyes as he looked around. After looking around for an entire moment, Sun Jian called out, "I'm afraid it's fine. Fellow immortal Shao, let's leave quickly." Sun Jian seemed to be very familiar with this place. He flew to a place in the space, looked around, and raised the Kunlun mirror in his hand. Another beam of light shot out from the mirror and shot into the space. Then, Sun Jian looked at the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand and put away the strange insect's hind leg. He looked at the broken weapon with some heartache. He raised his hand and drew in the air. A shallow crack appeared in front of him. Sun Jian stretched out his hand and grabbed one side of the crack. As if he was pulling, the crack actually opened up. Sun Jian lowered his head and drilled into the crack. Xiao Hua, who was watching from the side, was dumbfounded. Damn it, this Sun Jian can actually tear space apart with his hand? If Xiao Hua didn't see it with his own eyes, he wouldn't dare to believe it. What kind of divine ability was this? Of course, Sun Jian's move couldn't be denied as a show of force. Xiao Hua couldn't help but be vigilant. After passing through several similar spaces, Sun Jian and Xiao Hua arrived at a small space filled with clouds. Sun Jian entered the space and found a cloud to stand on. His golden eyes swept across the entire space. Slowly, the golden light around him dissipated, and his avatar returned to its original state. Xiaohua also stood several meters away from Sun Jian. His body flickered with brilliance, and he also withdrew his heavenly laws embodiment technique. Fellow immortal Xiao, Sun Jian looked at Xiaohua and said, "Where did this strange insect come from? Why is it so strange? Even if it was killed, how could it still attack us?" Xiaohua smiled bitterly and cupped his hands. "Fellow immortal Sun, this Xiao thanks fellow immortal for your help. If I didn't meet fellow immortal Sun today, this Xiao wouldn't know whether this Xiao's luck would be good or bad." Sun Jian faintly glanced at Xiaohua and said with a double meaning, "Unpredictable luck? That's not necessarily true. If fellow immortal Sun didn't intervene in the end, that strange insect might not have been killed." Hee. Xiaohua knew that Sun Jian saw something strange, but he didn't point it out. He continued, "As for fellow immortal Sun's question about the origin of the strange insect, this Xiao isn't clear. It was just a chance encounter. And it seems like it really is an alien creature." Sun Jian nodded. "This insect doesn't seem to have any soul. It's already so powerful, but when it was attacked just now, I didn't see any soul essence appear. If it was something from the Thousand Demons sacred realm, I'm afraid it would have already used its soul essence to escape." "That's right. This Xiao also examined it just now, and I didn't see any soul essence. Moreover, this Xiao has a magic treasure that's effective against souls, but it's ineffective against this insect." Xiaohua also nodded. "In addition, this insect is addicted to vital energy. It's not afraid of the Taoist's vital energy of heaven and earth or the Confucian cultivator's vital energy. If fellow immortal Sun didn't use the method of fighting poison with poison, we really wouldn't have been able to kill it. Fortunately, there's only one of this kind of alien creature. If there were another half of it, this Sun would also have to flee." Sun Jian smiled in a relaxed manner. Thinking about the matter of face that Sun Jian mentioned just now, Xiaohua also smiled. He stretched out his hand and said, "Fellow immortal Sun, do you have a Chinquan bag? I can return the void-penetrating beast to you." Sun Jian raised his eyebrows and was rather surprised. He was originally thinking about how to ask Xiaohua and what price he should pay to get the void-penetrating beast back. He didn't expect that after a few words, Xiaohua would directly ask to return it. "Many thanks, fellow immortal." Sun Jian naturally wouldn't be negligent. He touched his chest and took out a Chinquan bracelet and handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua also took out a small Chinquan bag and pretended to put the void-penetrating beast into the Chinquan bracelet. He handed it to Sun Jian and said, "All right, it's returned to its owner." After receiving the Chinquan bracelet, Sun Jian scanned it with his vital sense. Sure enough, he saw that the void-penetrating beast was still inside, without a single hair missing. Sun Jian almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. He hurriedly said, "Fellow immortal Xiao, please wait a moment. After I take out the void-penetrating eye, I'll return the other things to you. This is what I promised earlier." "Haha, do as you wish." Xiaohua chuckled. Actually, he was already muttering in his heart. Even if you want to take the void-penetrating eye, why don't you first leave the spatial meridian and arrive at Hidden Immortal Continent? But after only a short moment, Sun Jian spoke with a difficult expression. "Fellow immortal Xiao, I have no choice but to go back on my word once more." "Oh, why?" Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously. Sun Jian raised the Chinquan bracelet in his hand and explained. "Even though the void-penetrating eye on the void-penetrating beast is undamaged, the void-penetrating beast's vital essence has been completely exhausted. It's not suitable to take out the void-penetrating eye now. Only after the void-penetrating beast recovers its vital essence can the void-penetrating eye be taken out in perfect condition. So, I can't return the things I promised fellow immortal now. Otherwise, all of my painstaking efforts would be for naught." "Haha, so that's how it is." Xiaohua thought in his heart and hurriedly waved his hand. "I understand. I'll give it to fellow immortal. I don't have the qualifications to make a fuss about it with fellow immortal." "That won't do." Unexpectedly, Sun Jian shook his head in all seriousness. "How could I be someone that goes back on my word? After I take out the void-penetrating eye, I will give the other parts to fellow immortal. However, fellow immortal will have to wait for a few more years. It's fine, it's fine. Xiaohua had already obtained a lot from the Void Meridian, so he did not want to argue with Sun Jian anymore. He nodded and said, "When you and I return to the hidden immortal continent, fellow immortal will give me the address. I will go and find fellow immortal when I have time in the future. Fellow immortal should tell me the location of the cave." Sun Jian laughed. "I don't know when I can return this item to you." "Fine." Xiaohua laughed. "If nothing unexpected happens, I will be the imperial advisor of Yu Province's Jiang country in the future. Fellow immortal will know if you ask around." "All right, I'll remember it." Sun Jian nodded, and then said embarrassedly, "In addition, there is no way out from the spatial node here to the hidden immortal continent. Fellow immortal Xiao, you can either return to the hidden immortal continent through the passage you came from, or go out nearby. However, when I was chasing after the void-penetrating beast, a large-scale void storm appeared in this spatial node, causing the entire node to be extremely unstable. If nothing unexpected happens, it won't be long before this place collapses, and this spatial node won't exist either. Therefore, if I were fellow immortal, I definitely wouldn't take the risk and would make plans after leaving." Chapter 3393. Xiaohua was stunned. He was the one who added fuel to the fire in the void storm, so it was normal for the space node to be unstable. However, he didn't agree that it would immediately collapse. However, he still asked curiously, "Fellow immortal son, are you not going to return to the hidden immortal continent?" "Yes, I have other things to do, so I won't be returning for the time being," Sun Jian replied. Xiaohua was in a difficult position. He smiled bitterly and said, "Then where is the nearest space node?" At this point, Xiaohua suddenly understood. If it's not the hidden immortal continent, then it must be the Pure Land and the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. Since Sun Jian chased the void-penetrating beast to this place, if I'm not wrong, the nearest should be the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. The Pure Land world. Sun Jian's words killed Xiaohua's guess. If fellow immortal is willing, I can send fellow immortal to the Pure Land world. However, I'm not sure where in the Pure Land world this place is. When Xiaohua heard this, he almost laughed out loud. What was his biggest wish after arriving at the three continents? Wasn't it just going to the Pure Land world? Wasn't it just to wake Jiang Luer up? Now, he could actually arrive at the Pure Land world without using any heavenly steeds or crossing the ocean. What was there for Xiaohua to be unhappy about? Xiaohua suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and cupped his hands. "If so, fellow immortal, please send me to the Pure Land world." "Fellow immortal, you're a Taoist disciple. You have to be careful in the Buddhist sect's territory." Sun Jian didn't say much. He activated the Kunlun mirror and brought Xiaohua across several spaces. As they flew, he reminded, "Buddhist sect's bald donkeys are people who don't mean what they say. Don't let them see through you." If I don't say it myself, how would they know that I'm a Taoist?" Xiaohua smiled and touched his bald head. Sun Jian smiled and nodded. "That's true. If fellow immortal wasn't wearing a Taoist robe, I would really think that fellow immortal is a Buddhist sect disciple." As he spoke, Sun Jian took out the Kunlun mirror. He waved the three-pointed, double-edged blade again, and a small gap appeared in the void. As the gap appeared, a biting cold wind blew in, followed by fresh air. "Fellow immortal Xiao, please." Sun Jian put away his weapon and flew a few hundred feet away. He made way for the gap and cupped his hands with a smile. "The green hills never change, and the green waters flow forever. Fellow immortal son, we'll meet again." Xiaohua knew Sun Jian's intentions. He cupped his hands in salute and stepped out of the gap. Then, lightning flashed around his body as he flew into the distance. The gap high up in the sky gradually closed up. Sun Jian's eyes looked through the gap at the spot where Xiaohua had disappeared. As he looked at the swirling snowflakes, a thoughtful expression flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, "This Xiaohua is a kind and righteous person." Previously, He did not flee by himself. Later on, he even helped me kill the strange insect. In the end, he even completely handed over the void-penetrating beast to me. His cultivation may not be as good as mine, but if we really fight, he may not necessarily lose. He still has the void-penetrating beast in his hands. If he threatens this sun with it, it will really make things difficult for this sun. Void-penetrating eye, void-penetrating eye, this true monarch has finally obtained you. When I refine you, my divine power will definitely reach a higher level. At that time, even if I have to face Saint One, I won't be afraid. Sun Jian's figure disappeared, and the gap also gradually closed up. Finally, he disappeared among the palm-sized snowflakes. After 2 hours, Xiao Hua's figure slowly appeared on the left side of the gap. He also had a thoughtful expression on his face. He also pinched his chin with his hand and looked at the gap. Who is this Sun Jian? He is almost a Taoist spirit-severing stage cultivator, especially that Kunlun mirror and the 3-pointed, double-edged sword that can break the void. They are definitely not ordinary. Could it be that this Sun Jian is a member of a first-class family? While talking to himself, Xiao Hua patted his forehead with his hand, and the Dharma eye slowly opened. However, Xiao Hua didn't use the heavenly eye. Instead, the silver white eye slowly turned into a pure silver white. The silver white eye slowly rotated, and then a silver brilliance fell on the space where the gap was. Open! Xiao Hua shouted in a deep voice. The silver light beam roared, and with the rotation of the light beam, a small gap in the void also appeared in the air. Ha ha! I see. Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He stretched out an eye and quietly looked inside. He smiled and said, "The delusion breaker Dharma eye has such an effect. If it wasn't for the void-penetrating eye of the void-penetrating beast, this Xiao wouldn't have thought of it. With the Dharma eye, this Xiao can remember the location of this snow mountain. After Lu is settled, this Xiao can also return to the hidden immortal continent through the space meridian." Then, Xiao Hua turned his hand again, and a fist-sized silver bead appeared in his left hand. It was condensed from a void-penetrating beast light beam that rushed into the space, transformed by the delusion breaker Dharma eye in Xiao Hua's left hand. This is the essence of the void-penetrating beast that Sun Jian was talking about. Xiao Hua swept his gaze and sent the silver bead into the Dharma eye imprint on his forehead. He said with a smile, "If this Xiao can refine the essence of this void-penetrating beast, I'm afraid that the delusion breaker Dharma, I, and heavenly, I will rise to another level." Ha ha ha! Xiao Hua was really happy. He raised his head and laughed loudly. That laughter shook the surrounding snowflakes into powder. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and looked at the snowflakes that covered the sky, which blocked his vision like this. It even covered the snow mountain that he was on. Then he directly descended and used his divine sense to mark the snow mountain with his divine sense. Only then did he release his Buddhist sense and looked around. He casually found a piece of clothing that wasn't a Taoist robe from the space and put it on. Then he didn't fly far, but landed on the snow mountain. He stepped on the snowy ground with large strides and walked down the mountain. Because in his Buddhist sense, he already saw that there was a temple built on the mountainside of the snow mountain. The snow was very heavy, and the snowflakes were the size of a palm. They fell on Xiao Hua's bare head, and also fell on Xiao Hua's nondescript clothing. They even fell on the foot of the snow mountain. The snow on the foot of the mountain was at least a foot thick, and under the layer of snow, it was extremely smooth. It was obviously a thick layer of ice. In this kind of weather, ordinary cultivators would release their true qi to protect themselves. Cultivators who cultivated to the gold core realm would have a protective golden light. Even if they didn't do it deliberately, they would still be able to block all the dust, raindrops, and snowflakes outside their body. However, Xiao Hua was an exception. Although he didn't like dust, sometimes he also liked raindrops and snowflakes very much. Just like now, he withdrew the protective golden light and didn't even leak a trace of true qi. Previously, he slightly revealed his Confucian cultivation base, but now He was completely concealed under the secret soul cultivation technique. He was like an ordinary young man, walking step by step on the snow mountain. His whole body was already snowy white. If Xiao Hua wasn't walking, others would definitely not see such a white that in this vast white world. The snow mountain was extremely high, and the small temple was built halfway up the snow mountain. Xiao Hua walked down the faintly discernible mountain path step by step, and it took him no less than 2 hours. During these 2 hours, Xiao Hua's heart was like the world in the snow. The dust in his heart was slowly washed away by his slow steps. Even the impetuousness in the void and the bloodthirst from using the demon world's blood drop paradise gradually subsided. Once again, Xiao Hua's state of mind was like an ancient well without ripples. Although Xiao Hua couldn't see the nascent soul in his lower dantian, Xiao Hua could clearly sense that the newborn nascent soul was also sitting cross-legged in the original location of the nebula, in his lower dantian. Its hands were forming hand seals, and it was cultivating with its 5 hearts facing the sky. Seeing the corner of the small temple on the side of the pine tree not far away, the corner of Xiao Hua's mouth curled up. He looked left and right, and the path under his feet had already appeared. The place covered in snow was obviously a bit shorter than the other places. Xiao Hua stepped on the path, but in his heart, he secretly thought, "This Xiao's nascent soul is a bit strange. Not to mention that all the meridians in my body are opened. Even the image of my nascent soul is faintly discernible. Previously, when it climbed out of my body and arrogantly pointed at the world, I could still see its shadow, but when it entered my dantian, it disappeared. Also, although this nascent soul looks like me, but why does it look like a huge nebula most of the time? Even the color of its skin is very different. Not to mention when it's hidden. When it's revealed, it's not necessarily black and white or 7 colors. As the saying goes, the appearance is born from the heart. This Zhao's Dharma idol is naturally this Zhao's image, and that spiritual idol Dharma body is also the image of this Zhao's nascent soul. Naturally, this nascent soul should also be this Zhao's image. This is without a doubt, but why does it often give this Xiao the illusion that it's a nebula? Nebula? Thinking of a nebula, Xiao Hua's body trembled, and he was stunned on the spot. The heavenly Tao starry sky? Isn't the heavenly Tao starry sky made up of all the nebulas? In other words, the nascent soul is not born from me, but from my Tao foundation. The nascent soul is the result of my cultivation. I have succeeded in comprehending the heavenly Tao. Although it's only in the so-called heaven glimpse realm, this heaven glimpse realm is also integrated into my Tao foundation, and now it's manifested in this nascent soul. Heavenly Tao, oh heavenly Tao, only the heavenly Tao is the pinnacle of my Tao cultivation. Even if I cultivate a nascent soul, I still have to rely on the nascent soul to strengthen my Tao foundation, and use the nascent soul to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Since the foundation of the Tao sect is the heavenly Tao, then what is the end of the Tao sect cultivator's cultivation? Also, the foundation of soul cultivation is the 9 heavens of spirit origin. What is the pinnacle of soul cultivation? Xiao Hua, who had made great progress in his Tao sect cultivation, couldn't help but have a shocking thought. The foundation of Confucian cultivation is the 5 Qis unification. What is the pinnacle of Confucian cultivation? The foundation of Buddhism. What is it? It can't be Buddha Sarira, right? The pinnacle of Buddhism is Buddha. Is it the fruit of Buddhism? Dang. Right at this moment, a muffled sound was like a blow to the head. Then, a burst of ice-cold energy fell from the sky, and some even fell on Xiao Hua's neck. Ah! Xiao Hua was startled, and he hastily raised his head, only to see that in front of him was a strange tree that was 9 zhang tall. When he lowered his head to think, he bumped into the tree trunk, and with this collision, the snow on the strange tree's branches and leaves fell down one after another, revealing a half-chi long leaf that looked like a heart, and also like an eye. Chapter 3394. Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the leaf, somewhat astonished. Under the heavy snow, the leaf was still verdant, without the slightest trace of wilting or yellow. The contrast between the snow white and the green of the leaf made the vitality of the green leaf even more obvious. Looking at the tree trunk that he had crashed into, he realized that it was different from an ordinary tree trunk. This tree trunk was several feet in size, and it was not an independent tree trunk. Instead, it was formed by dozens of tree trunks clustered together. These dozens of tree trunks were rugged and coiled together into a cluster. Each of the individual tree trunks was strong and powerful, and the bottom of the tree trunks was deeply embedded in the snow-covered foothills. When he reached the middle of the tree trunk, these dozens of tree trunks coiled together into one. Branches, leaves, and leaves spread out from the top of this tree trunk, covering an area of several hundred feet to his left. What kind of strange tree is this? The pitiful Xiao Hua came from the barren Dawn Rain continent of the Buddhist sect, so he naturally didn't know the origin of this tree. He inwardly wondered, this tree doesn't look like an ordinary spiritual tree. But if it isn't a spiritual tree, how can it still maintain its leaves and branches so green in this heavy snow? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the small temple not far away. He smiled and said, "Wouldn't it be fine if I go over and ask?" The small temple wasn't big. It was comparable to the Jiangqiao Mountain Range's Jiangqiao Temple. Moreover, the front of the small temple was covered in snow, and there were no traces of anyone passing by. Xiao Hua already knew that this must be another dilapidated temple. When Xiao Hua arrived in front of the small temple, he turned his head and looked at the winding footprints he left behind along the way. A kind of understanding appeared in his heart. Wild geese leave their sound when they pass by. People leave their names when they pass by. This Xiao only occasionally passed by this mountain and left behind such a heavy snow. Although the sky is clear after the snow, and no one knows this Zhao's journey, but what about this Zhao's heart? What about this Zhao's memories? What about the great master of this temple? Forget it, forget it. A person's journey, the shadow of heaven and earth, the chaos of the world. Who can understand? Xiao Hua suddenly felt that he seemed to have aged a lot. Everything would make him sad. He hurriedly shook his head and looked at the plaque above the small temple. Yang, Ling, Wangxi. The signboard of the temple was clearly written in Sanskrit. Xiao Hua could also be considered to be able to read it, but this signboard was truly very old. It looked almost as old as the spiritual herbs in Xiao Hua's space. Therefore, the writing on the signboard had long been blurred. Xiao Hua tried to decipher it a few times and simply gave up. He lifted his foot and was about to walk up the steps to knock on the similarly tattered temple door. Suddenly, Xiao Hua stopped because the steps in front of the temple gate were abnormally clean, with only a few snowflakes drifting down with the wind. It was clear that someone had just cleaned it. Xiao Hua hastily retreated a few steps and shook his body. The snowflakes around him flew up, revealing Xiao Hua's unusually dry clothes. But just as those snowflakes were about to fall, Xiao Hua seemed to have thought of something. With a wave of his hand, all of the snowflakes once again landed on his body. Then Xiao Hua extended his hand and wiped his head. Then he patted his body several dozen times, shaking off most of the accumulated snow. After leaving a portion of the accumulated snow, he respectfully stepped forward and knocked on the bronze ring on the temple's door. Dang, dang, dang. The sound of the door knocker wasn't loud, but it was very clear. Amidst the shuffling of the falling snow and the whooshing of the breeze, the sound of the door knocker spread far and wide, however. After a moment, he didn't hear any sound coming from inside the temple gate, nor did he hear any footsteps. I know. Xiao Hua tentatively pushed the door. The temple gate was unlatched, so when he pushed it open, there wasn't any screen wall in front of him, but rather a small open space. The first thing that entered Xiao Hua's eyes was an orange-red mass. When Xiao Hua focused his eyes, he could already see clearly that it was a monk wearing strange orange-red clothing lying on top of a pile of snow. On the other side of the monk was a half-swept open space. Seeing this, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. Just as he was about to fly over to rescue the monk, he saw the motionless monk's entire body twitch. Then, slowly and with great difficulty, he curled up from the ground and crawled up. At this moment, Xiao Hua could see clearly that this was an old man who was over 60 years old. The skin on his face was very dark red, and his entire face was covered with wrinkles, just like a walnut. Under his snow-white eyebrows, there was only a kind of turbidity in his eyes. The old monk stood up. First, he looked around. Then he slowly bent down and picked up a strange orange-red hat that looked like a coxcomb from the ground. He carefully knocked off the snow on the hat, then carefully put it on his bald head. Xiao Hua could see clearly that although the old monk was careful, there seemed to be a problem with his eyes. Cleaning the hat was completely based on his intuition. At the end of the strange hat, there were a lot of snow that he did knock off. After putting on the hat, the old monk bent down again with great difficulty. He picked up a broom from the ground and slowly started sweeping. Although the old monk was sweeping, he was sweeping too slowly. The snowflakes in the sky were too big. Just as he swept, another snowflake fell. It was as if the old monk hadn't swept at all. Xiao Hua quietly stood at the entrance of the temple. He didn't make a sound, nor did he approach. He only silently watched. This old monk was completely different from Seven Suns Temple's Daoshan. One was in the hidden immortal continent, the other was in the Western Paradise. One was a disciple of the Tao sect, the other was a disciple of the Buddhist sect. However, in Xiao Hua's eyes, the two of them didn't seem to be any different. The broom that the old monk waved was very similar to the spoon that Daoshan used to give porridge. They were both so firm and so persistent. Seeing that the empty space wasn't that big, the old monk swept it for the time it took to eat a meal. When the old monk turned around, the entire empty space was covered in a layer of snow. This empty space was a small square in front of the temple's main hall. It wasn't like the steps in front of the temple that were blocked by eaves. Seeing that the old monk didn't say anything and didn't even raise his head and started sweeping again, Xiao Hua could only cough. The snowflakes were so big, and the old monk's movements were so slow. Xiao Hua didn't doubt that unless the snow stopped, the old monk would never be able to finish sweeping. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua's ordinary cough didn't attract the old monk's attention. The broom was still sweeping the empty space. Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the somewhat gloomy main hall. After hesitating for a moment, he still released his Buddhist sense. After taking a rough look, he knew that there was no one else in this temple other than the old monk. Xiao Hua could only walk in front of the old monk. He clasped his hands together and called out, "Amitabha Buddha. Elder, how are you?" The old monk acted as if he didn't hear Xiao Hua's words, or perhaps he was simply unfazed by the chaos. He snorted and ignored Xiao Hua. After sweeping several feet in front of Xiao Hua, he seemed to have suddenly understood. He slowly raised his head and looked at Xiao Hua with his murky eyes. When his gaze landed on Xiao Hua's bald head, he slowly hugged the broom in his arms and clasped his hands together. "Amitabha, you've finally come. I'm finally here." "Elder, what do you mean?" Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. However, he wasn't surprised because in Xiao Hua's eyes, the old monk didn't see his face at all. He only saw his bald head. Other than the old monk mistaking him for someone else, he didn't make any other guesses. "Elder, you mistook me for someone else," Xiao Hua said with a smile. Everything about the old monk was slow, whether it was sweeping or speaking. However, since the old monk spoke, the old monk didn't pay attention to Xiao Hua's words. He asked again, "What is your Buddhist name?" The old monk's words just happened to interrupt Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua faintly smiled. He knew that the old monk didn't listen to his words, so he replied, "I don't need to mention my Buddhist name." That's right, Xiao Hua didn't shave his head. He wasn't an orthodox Buddhist disciple. Where did his Buddhist name come from? However, the old monk seemed to be able to understand at this time. He nodded slightly and said, "Oh, so you're called Bodhi." "Bodhi?" Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This old monk was really good at interrupting. He actually found his Buddhist name in such a short time. The old monk was even more interesting. After saying this sentence, he picked up the broom again. He seemed to have forgotten Xiao Hua and started sweeping the snow again. He swept for a moment before he stopped and said slowly, Bodhi, my Buddhist sect doesn't seem to have this seniority. Oh, right, little monk, you're a layman disciple of my Buddhist sect? Yes, I'm a layman disciple. Xiaohua thought for a moment and could only reply. He didn't enter the Buddhist sect and cultivated the Buddhist sect's cultivation method. It was appropriate to say that he was a layman disciple. However, Xiaohua was very doubtful whether the old monk heard him say this sentence, because after saying this sentence, the old monk started sweeping the snow again. It seemed that if the snow didn't stop, he wouldn't stop sweeping. Besides sweeping the snow, he didn't do anything else. Xiaohua sighed. He knew that his purpose of inquiring about information wouldn't be realized. After thinking for a moment, he bowed and said, I won't disturb the elder's cultivation. I'll take my leave. Just as he stood up, the old monk raised his head again. His turbid eyes didn't know whether he was looking at Xiaohua or at the temple door behind Xiaohua. He said, This poor monk has been waiting in this Shaoling Long temple for 90 years. Now, this poor monk has reached the point where the oil lamp has dried up. Calculating, you should have come in 2 days. This poor monk has finally completed the mission of my Shaoling Long temple and led the future Buddha to the Pure Land world. Boom! In an instant, Xiaohua's bald head seemed to be bombarded by a pillar of awe-inspiring qi. When Xiaohua heard the words Shaoling Long temple, he immediately thought of his exquisite leaf scripture. When the old monk said the words future Buddha, although the old monk's words were very soft and even somewhat inaccurate, in Xiaohua's ears, it was almost like a bolt from the blue. Large beads of sweat seeped out from the top of his head. His whole body was slightly swaying. Looking at the monk sweeping the snow in front of him, an indescribable strangeness arose from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 33:95. Elder. Xiaohua's voice is almost trembling. He stares at the old monk and says tentatively, I just came here to ask for directions. How did I become the future Buddha? Unfortunately, the old monk lowered his head again, turning a deaf ear to Xiaohua's words as he continued sweeping the snow. How could Xiaohua, who had already planned to leave, move again? He stood there quietly, staring at the old monk without blinking. His Buddhist sense had been fully released, covering the entire Shaoling Long temple. His eyes were full of disbelief, and his heart was thumping wildly. He was thinking about the credibility of the old monk's words. Snowflakes were still falling, and there was no wind in the Shaoling Long temple. The old monk had just swept 30% of the courtyard when Xiaohua made up his mind. There were too many unimaginable things in this world. Jiuxia's art of clairvoyance, the Shaman King's art of divine connection, and his hand of karma. Jiuxia could predict that he would appear in Huan Kingdom. The Shaman King could predict that he would appear in Meng Mountains. And this senior of the Buddhist sect could predict that he would appear in this Shaoling Long temple 90 years ago. It was nothing, and Xiaohua chose to believe it. However, Xiaohua was still puzzled. How could this old monk recognize him at a glance? Could it be that he knew that he would come today? Or did the senior of the Buddhist sect leave behind an image? If he knew that he would come today, 90 years ago, and left behind an image, would that senior know about his lost treasure in the Western Ocean? Or perhaps, if he had changed his appearance when he was forming his nascent soul in the void, would this old monk still be able to recognize him? Looking at the old monk sweeping the snow, Xiaohua waved his hand, and the seal of ocean, turning seal, flew out of the void and rushed into the sky. Its bronze brilliance covered the entire Shaoling Long temple tightly, and no more snowflakes would fall. The old monk naturally would not look up. He swept the snow in the yard with a broom and suddenly raised his head again. He did not care whether Xiaohua was beside him or not. He opened his mouth and said, Beauty, don't be surprised. When Master accepted this poor monk, he had already said that the mission of Xiling Long Temple is to wait for the arrival of the future Buddha Lord. If a disciple can't find another disciple in his life, then he will definitely be able to wait for the arrival of the future Buddha Lord in his life. After saying this, the old monk swept the snow again until all the snow was piled up in the corner of the courtyard. Then, he trembled to the door of the main hall, carefully placed the broom next to the thick pillar, bent down with difficulty, and randomly chose a row of large vats. He removed the wooden lid on the vats, took out a small wooden spoon, scooped up the water in the vats, and drank 2 mouthfuls. He wiped the water stains on the corner of his mouth with his strange monk robe and said, "This poor monk has tried every means to accept a disciple in his life, but he has never accepted a disciple. Therefore, this poor monk knows that the glory of welcoming the future Buddha must fall on this poor monk." However, this poor monk still didn't expect that the Buddha would come so late. It's so late that this poor monk can't do anything for the Buddha. "Elder," Xiao Hua walked in front of the old monk and asked with a smile, "Elder, what's your Dharma name? Elder, why do you suddenly think that I'm the future Buddha? Could it be that no one has ever come to the Shaolin Long Temple?" "This poor monk's Dharma name? Don't mention it. This poor monk doesn't even remember what it's called." This time, the old monk really heard Xiao Hua's voice and replied, "It's not that no one has ever come to my Shaolin Long Temple. Usually, there are monks who stay, and there are also devout benefactors. However, if it's someone like the Buddha who doesn't speak the language of my pure land, then there's not a single one. To be a disciple of my Shaolin Long Temple, being able to communicate with the Buddha is the most important thing." This poor monk often talks to himself when he has nothing to do, so he won't forget these words. Moreover, as he spoke, the old monk opened his mouth again and actually used the language of the Dawn Rain continent to say, "Could it be that the Buddha wants this poor monk to say these strange words? These words this poor monk can't say too much." Of course, the old monk's words were very jerky, and even some of his words were inaccurate, but Xiao Hua heard it clearly. This was the language of the Dawn Rain continent that he hadn't heard for a long time. How is this possible? Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. His previous doubts were all gone. He had forgotten that the writing and language of the Pure Land and the hidden immortal continent were different. Just as he entered the temple, he spoke the language of the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent to the old monk, and the old monk also responded accordingly. Now that he thought about it, just now, the old monk really seemed to be talking to himself. Now that the old monk actually spoke the language of the Dawn Rain continent, how could Xiao Hua not be surprised? What happened next was even more out of Xiao Hua's expectations. The old monk didn't bring him to the main hall of the temple and didn't say much to him. Instead, he walked to a small house on the left side of the temple. Not long after, a burst of smoke floated out of the window of the small house, and then a kind of faint fragrance floated out from inside. Xiao Hua didn't follow. Now that he was surprised, he walked to the door of the small house and stuck his head out to take a look. This small house looked like a kitchen. There was some neatly arranged firewood inside, and there was also a small stove. On top of the stove, there was a small iron pot. At this moment, something was cooking inside. That thing looked very viscous, and along with the fire, it rolled around with a gurgling sound. When the fire under the stove was gradually extinguished, the old monk took out a pot and 2 crude big bowls from the wooden cabinet next to the stove. Using his withered hand, which only had bones left, he picked up the small iron pot and poured the viscous liquid into the pot. Then he took out several bottles and jars from the wooden cabinet and took out some ordinary-looking ingredients and put them into the pot. The old monk picked up the pot and slightly shook it a few times. Unexpectedly, some yellowish liquid was poured out from the pot. When the 2 big bowls were filled, the old monk carefully picked up a bowl and handed it to Xiao Hua and said, "This is my Snowy Mountain special butter tea. Try it." This thing was this poor monk's favorite 10 years ago. In recent years, in order to maintain this poor monk's body, I haven't used it for a long time. Since you've come today, this poor monk will also satisfy this craving. Xiao Hua smelled the aroma of the butter tea, and there was a strong, meaty smell inside. He was quite unhappy in his heart, but when he heard the old monk's words, his heart was slightly sour. Respectfully taking the big bowl, Xiao Hua said, This poor monk thanks Elder. Thank Elder for guarding this place for more than 90 years. Finished speaking, Xiaohua raised the big bowl and drank the butter tea into his stomach. A warm feeling came from his stomach, and even more so from the bottom of his heart. The old monk naturally didn't have Xiaohua's good appetite. He only drank half of it, but he couldn't drink anymore. With a sigh, he put the big bowl on the stove, looked at it with some regret, and said with a bitter smile, "After not drinking for so many years, this poor monk is afraid that he can't drink anymore." Xiaohua's eyebrows jumped, and he said with a smile, "If you didn't meet me, then it would have been fine. But since you let me come to Shaoling Long Temple." At this point, Xiaohua hurriedly shut his mouth. He didn't dare to say anything else. It seemed that before this, as long as he had the intention, there wouldn't be a good outcome for anyone who took the rejuvenation pill. And the old monk in front of him was already on the verge of death. Xiaohua couldn't guarantee that his rejuvenation pill would be effective on him. The old monk didn't listen to Xiaohua's words at all, nor did he look at Xiaohua. He immediately said, "Buddha wants to thank a lot of people. This poor monk is only one of them. Shaoling Long Temple has been built for 9,999 years. If we wait another 9 days, then it will be 10,000 years. This poor monk doesn't even know how many generations Shaoling Long Temple has passed down. Only the Bodhi tree outside Shaoling Long Temple was planted when Shaoling Long Temple was built. It has witnessed the wind and frost of Shaoling Long Temple for 10,000 years. Xiaohua was shocked again. He looked left and right at the darkroom. He really didn't expect that this ordinary temple, without any Buddhist formations or Buddhist lights, will have such a long history. "Buddha Lord, please follow this poor monk." The old monk didn't even lift his eyelids. He slowly walked out of the small hut and walked to the left side of the main hall. He pushed the door, and the door opened with a click. There were more than 10 cabinets inside, which were densely packed with scriptures. Behind these cabinets, there was a tall Buddhist shrine with many Buddhist archives placed inside. The old monk pointed and said, "This is my Shaoling Long Temple's scripture pavilion. Buddha Lord, in the future, you must read the scriptures here word by word." In my Buddhist sect, although divine abilities are important, the Dharma is the most important. This, Xiaohua wryly smiled and opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to answer. He really came to ask for directions and wanted to know where he wanted to go. He really didn't come to be the future Buddha Lord and didn't want to read any Buddhist scriptures in this Shaoling Long Temple. The old monk didn't wait for Xiaohua to say more. He reached out and closed the door of the main hall. Then, he brought Xiaohua to the right side of the main hall and pushed the door open. There was a thick pagoda in the main hall. This pagoda didn't have any Buddhist lights and even looked a bit rough and simple. Moreover, it looked very strange. Layers of railings and stairs were built outside of the pagoda. This is my Shaoling Long Temple's pagoda. Since the establishment of Shaoling Long Temple, all of the disciples' relics are here. After this poor monk passes away, a relic will be left behind. Buddha Lord can place this poor monk's relic on top of it, and this pagoda will be complete. Every day, we will chant and pray for Buddha Lord arrival. These relics are filled with our willpower. When Buddha Lord achieves enlightenment, they will be of great use. The old monk's tone was as calm as water. He pointed at the pagoda and spoke in a very natural manner. It was as if these relics were the butter tea that Xiaohua used earlier, and not the true fruits that Buddhist disciples refined for dozens of years. I hope that everyone can read it for free. In addition, fellow Taoist Enchanting has also written a book called Seeking Venerables in the Nine Heavens. Although it is just the beginning, I know that writing a book is not easy, so I hope everyone can support me. I thank everyone on behalf of fellow Taoist Enchanting. Chapter 3396. Xiaohua smiled wryly. Back on the Dawnrain continent, he had seen the visions of the Tusita heaven and the Kiliacosm of worlds, and knew that the exquisite Leaf Sutra was a technique cultivated by the future Buddhist Lord. But he had never considered becoming the future Buddhist Lord, Nor could he ever have guessed that in the great snowy mountain, in the exquisite leaf temple, there would be so many monks waiting for him to come. Not only would they pray to him every day, but they would also hand over their sariras after they died. Xiaohua was even more aware that although these relics all carried their own karma, they all had a common obsession. Therefore, if he wanted to achieve the Buddha fruit of the future Buddha Lord, swallowing these relics would definitely be beneficial to him and not harmful to him. However, could Xiaohua swallow these sariras? The old monk seemed to have seen through Xiaohua's thoughts. Of course, it was more likely that he had already prepared the wording. Helping the Buddha Lord to achieve enlightenment is our obsession. Moreover, if the Buddha Lord achieves enlightenment, the sariras will merge with the Buddha Lord. It will also be of great benefit to us. Buddha Lord doesn't need to think too much. Okay, Xiaohua nodded, but he didn't make a decision in his heart. Seeing Xiaohua nod, the old monk closed the door again. He walked to the front of the main hall and looked at the closed door. The future Buddha Lord hasn't come yet. The main hall of my exquisite temple doesn't worship incense. It only opens the door at the end of the year. Now that the Buddha Lord has finally come to the exquisite temple, it's the day when the main hall of my exquisite temple opens. From now on, all the tantric temples in the Pure Land can worship incense. Tantric? Xiaohua was stunned. He thought of his Buddha seal catalog. Wasn't that thing from Tantric? I'm afraid the Buddha Lord hasn't shaved his head, and he doesn't have a certificate or a Dharma name, right? The old monk looked at the closed door with some excitement and whispered something. Indeed, Xiaohua didn't deny and replied, the Buddha Lord's Dharma name doesn't need to be based on seniority. The seniors of my exquisite temple said that the future Buddha Lord's Dharma name is what it is. The Buddha Lord's name is Bodhi, so his Dharma name is Bodhi. The old monk continued. However, this Dharma name is used before the Buddha Lord attains karma. After attaining karma, he can only be called Namo Dang Lai, Xia Methreya. At this point, the old monk seemed to have thought of something. His walnut-like wrinkles rippled with joy. It's the fortune of my 9 lifetimes to be able to shave the future Buddha Lord's head and introduce him to Buddhism. I will definitely attain karma in my next life and become Namo Methreya. Seeing the happiness on this old monk's face, Xiaohua's heart gives birth to a kind of reverence. This was a joy that came from the bottom of his heart, a sublimation of his faith. Just like the 7 Sons Monastery's Daoshan, when he saw the leftover porridge in his mouth fall into the mouths of the beggars, he would feel blessed. Every day, when he lit the incense on the wooden tablets in the main hall of the 7 Sons Monastery, he would feel that this was a sign of the Taoist sect. Shanzai Amipa. Xiaohua felt the same in his heart and bowed. When the old monk heard Xiaohua recite the name of Buddha, he felt comfortable no matter how he heard it. He stretched out his hand and was about to push open the door of the hall. However, just as his finger touched the door, he retracted it and very naturally patted his extremely wrinkled forehead. He seemed to be muttering to himself again. You see, this poor monk is really old. The Buddha Lord is going to shave his head today, so naturally he has to make some preparations. First of all, the worries of the mortal fetus on his head must be removed. Next, the Buddha Lord needs to bathe and change clothes. Elder, Xiaohua smiled and said, this one, Buddha Lord. Unexpectedly, the old monk's ears were very sharp. Xiaohua just opened his mouth and waved his hand, saying, the word this one is used by laymen to express humility. The Buddha Lord has not yet shaved his head, so he can call himself that. However, after shaving his head, he can no longer call himself that. This elder, this poor monk, is also unworthy of this title. If you call me old monk, this poor monk is already very satisfied. However, all monks call themselves monks, poor monks, and so on. The Buddha Lord will definitely attain Buddha fruit in the future, so you can't be so humble. Calling yourself this one, or just me, is also good. Me? Xiaohua was somewhat confused. Isn't this a common way of calling yourself? The old monk smiled and said, the Buddha Lord really hasn't shaved his head, so you don't know much about Buddhism. The Buddhist scriptures that my exquisite temple has collected over the generations, The Buddha Lord must consider every word carefully. Yes, this one knows. Xiao Hua readily accepted, unwilling to make this old monk unhappy. Hearing this, the old monk slightly nodded and pointed outside the temple, saying, "Let's go, Buddha Lord. This poor monk will take you to the warm water by the mountain stream to wash up. We'll talk while walking. Elder, don't leave the temple. Right now, the sky is filled with wind and snow. It's very inconvenient." Xiao Hua hurriedly said, "Elder, you only need to tell me the location." "Alas, fine." The old monk lowered his head and looked at his hands and feet, saying with a bitter smile, "This poor monk's eyes are blurred. My hands and feet don't listen to my orders. To be able to see the Buddha Lord on the last day is already a blessing. To speak of serving the Buddha Lord, this poor monk's strength is truly beyond my reach." The more the old monk spoke, the more fluent the Tibetan Immortal Continent's language became. Many words popped out. It was clear that in these 90 years, he had put in a lot of effort in this aspect. Although the old monk didn't need to send Xiao Hua down, the old monk still insisted on sending him to the temple's entrance. He even said while walking, "The Buddha said that the immeasurable life sutras said, thus the small kings scattered, heard that the great king's wife had a wife, came to congratulate her, brought gold, silver, precious treasures, clothes, and a fragrance of flowers, respectfully offered tribute and praised. Immeasurable wife, raised hands to welcome, didn't want to trouble. Since the wife, heaven offers the taste to the masses, nourishes the essence, naturally full, didn't serve the imperial chef. October was over. The crown prince was born. On the 7th of April, the wife went out, past the refugee tree. Flowers bloomed. When the star came out, the wife climbed the branch, fell to the ground from the right side, walked 7 steps, raised hands. Heaven and earth, only I am honored. The 3 realms are suffering. I should be at ease." At the same time, heaven and earth moved. 3,000 great 1,000 karmic earth. All were enlightened. The 4 kings of Shurfan, along with the officials of the dragon ghosts and deities, Asuran, all came with guards. There were the Dragon King brothers. 1 Garuda, 2 Garudas. The left rained warm water, the right rained cold spring. Shurfan, Mo, wrapped the heavenly clothes, heavenly rain and the fragrance of flowers, playing the zither and drum music, burning incense, pounding the fragrance of flowers. Voidside Fortress. The first Buddha of the Buddhist sect was born with the words, "Only I am honored in heaven and earth." Although the Buddhist sect hasn't achieved fruition yet, and hasn't even shaved, the word I is worthy of it. The old monk recited the Buddhist sutra as if he was familiar with it. He even slowly explained it to Xiao Hua. Naturally, there was a lot of Sanskrit mixed in. Xiao Hua listened as if he didn't understand, but this "only I am honored in heaven and earth" was clearly heard. "Good," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "This seed understands. Many thanks for Elder's teachings." Buddha. At this point, the 2 also arrived outside the temple. Although the outside of the temple was completely different from the inside of the temple, the old monk didn't see it at all. He very naturally pointed to a place and said, 999 feet under the Bodhi tree, there is a pool bestowed by Buddha. My Shaolin Long Temple's disciples all bathe and shave there. Yes, Elder, please return. After this seat has bathed, I will return to the temple. Xiao Hua followed the old monk's finger. His Buddhist awareness swept over and immediately saw the location of the pool. He hurriedly said to the old monk. The old monk's eyes were still turbid. He looked left and right, not knowing whether he saw Xiao Hua or not. But he said, "Yes, this poor monk will go prepare a monk robe for Buddha Lord. This item is also something my Shaolin Long Temple has prepared. After Buddha Lord bathes, change clothes, and shave." Then, when Xiao Hua heard about shave, his heart jumped. He hurriedly asked, "Elder, the Buddhist precepts, Buddha Lord, rest assured." The old monk had already prepared the words. His dry mouth cracked open, and he said with a smile, "Buddha Lord came from afar. Naturally, you don't know the precepts of my tantric sect. My tantric sect is different from other sections. We don't prohibit meat and fish, marriage. Buddha Lord, rest assured. Tantric sect doesn't prohibit anything. Besides, you are the future Buddha Lord. Don't you have the final say in all the rules and prohibitions? That's good. Xiaohua was slightly relieved. He immediately thought of the butter tea the old monk just drank. There was a meat and fish taste in it. After speaking, Xiaohua's feet produced auspicious clouds, and he landed toward the pool. The old monk unexpectedly didn't know. He still said with a smile, "My tantric sect is a small branch of Buddhism. We only worship the future Buddha Lord. These precepts were set by Buddha, Lord Tathagata. How can we follow them? I won't hide it from Buddha Lord. In the past, this poor monk also had a relationship with the secular world. It's just that it's been too long and there's no news about it." The old monk said a few more words. Seeing that no one answered, he knew that Xiaohua had already left. He slowly turned around and walked toward the main hall of the temple. Just as the old monk was about to push open the door, his body suddenly leaned against the door. As the door opened, the old monk's body fell to the ground again. After half a meal's time, the old monk's body shook a few times. He then slowly climbed up from the ground. He turned his head left and right and sensed that he was in the main hall. A trace of tears slowly flowed down from his turbid eyes. He then walked to the only shabby praying mat in the main hall. He knelt down and kowtowed to the incense table. He whispered, "Namo Mithra Buddha, this disciple's life is coming to an end. Only a few people will know about this disciple's life. This disciple disdains others to know about this disciple. It's fine as long as Buddha Lord can see it clearly. This disciple shaved his head when he was young and has accompanied Buddha Lord for more than 90 years. Since Master returned to the West, this exquisite temple has been guarded by this disciple alone. After more than 60 years, this disciple has finally seen Buddha Lord's body in this life. This disciple's lifelong wish has been achieved. My exquisite temple's mission can be considered completed. This disciple knows that this disciple should be assisting Buddha Lord's body in reading Buddhist scriptures. In the end, this disciple will accompany Buddha Lord on his journey. But this disciple is unworthy. This disciple can no longer endure the laziness of this body. I don't want to stay in this world anymore. Namo Mithra Buddha. This disciple sincerely asks for Buddha Lord's forgiveness. This disciple sincerely asks Buddha Lord to take this disciple back to the Western paradise." Chapter 33:97. The old monk's words were close to Sanskrit. Not to mention Xiaohua was not here. Even if Xiaohua was here, he would not be able to hear it clearly. After the old monk kowtowed, he shakily walked out of the main hall and came to a small hut. The hut was very simple. There were only a few old wooden cabinets. The old monk fumbled around in the cabinets and took out a black wooden box. After opening it, there were more than 10 boxes inside. Most of these boxes were empty. Only the bottommost boxes had a few thumb-sized black beads. The old monk stretched out his shriveled finger and took out a black bead. He slowly put it in his mouth, but after hesitating for a moment, he put it back into the box. His turbid eyes seemed to be staring at a certain place in the air. After a moment of pause, he picked up the bead again. After a few times, the old monk finally put the bead back into the box. His mouth trembled as he whispered, "Namo Mithra Buddha. Disciple asks Buddha for forgiveness." After saying that, he closed the wooden box and put it back into the wooden cabinet. Then he slowly walked out of the hut. Xiaohua naturally did not know that Tantra Buddhism had always thrived in the snowy mountains. Their living environment was the most bitter and cold. In order to reproduce, in order to cultivate Buddhism, it was impossible for them to forbid meat and marriage. Xiaohua wanted to refine Buddhism's cultivation method and become the future Buddha Lord. It seemed that only by shaving his head and becoming a monk could he truly learn the true essence of Buddhism. In this way, this Tantric Buddhism branch was suitable. Moreover, the exquisite leaf scripture was originally the cultivation method of the future Buddha Lord. This exquisite leaf temple had been waiting for Xiao Hua on this snowy mountain for tens of thousands of years. Everything seemed to be a matter of course. However, Xiao Hua, who was flying in the air, was actually moving very slowly. He could not help but think in his heart, AI, this Xiao just came to ask for directions. Really, just to ask for directions. I don't have any other thoughts. How could I encounter such a strange thing? Although Xiao Hua had already used divination to convince himself in his heart, when he thought about how he was about to become a monk and become the future Buddha Lord, which was more powerful than Guanyin Bodhisattva, he could not help but mutter in his heart, this exquisite leaf temple. It was actually built 10,000 years ago just to wait for this Xiao. 10,000 years ago. Even I don't know where I was. Since this Buddhist sect senior from 10,000 years ago already knows of this Xiao, then does the current Buddhist Lord also know of this Xiao? Besides, although I've been expelled from the Imperial Thunder sect, I'm still a genuine disciple of the Tao sect. What's the point of shaving my head? Even Frost Bamboo didn't really shave his head to become a monk, right? Xiao Hua had already thought of this before, but now he couldn't help but think about it carefully. This was because the thought of running away in Xiao Hua's heart was growing stronger and stronger. If he wasn't soft-hearted and couldn't bear to see the old monk's sincerity, he would have already run away in a sorry state. The key point was that Xiao Hua didn't want to hurt the old monk's heart. And even more, he didn't want to fail to live up to the painstaking efforts and expectations of who knows how many generations of Shaolin Long Temple's abbots over the past 10,000 years. Xiao Hua really wants to run away. The temptation of exquisite leaf temple is too great. Not only are there Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques of the Buddhist sect, there are also so many relics. If Xiao Hua has these things, the cultivation of the Buddhist sect will definitely skyrocket. However, although Xiao Hua is greedy, he still can't bear to blacken his heart to such an extent when it comes to the painstaking efforts of others over the past 10,000 years. He uses his own false thoughts to swindle others and swindle them to pretend to be some future Buddhist lord. Go or not go? Xiao Hua's heart was still wavering even when he flew above the hot spring. To go or not to go is really a difficult problem, making it hard for him to make a decision. The hot spring in front of him is several zhang in size. It is on the side of the cliff between exquisite leaf temple and the foot of the mountain. The hot spring is filled with steam, melting all the snowflakes that originally fell into the hot spring into threads of water. The threads of water slowly fall down and merge into the unceasingly rolling water surface, disappearing in a moment. The water of the hot spring is azure. Between the rolling water, it is like a boiling crystal. Near the hot spring, there are many spiritual herbs swaying under the steam of the hot spring. Further away from the hot spring, and several zhang above the hot spring, there are piles of several feet of snow. The white of the snow and the blue of the hot spring complemented each other. It looks very pleasing to the eye, like a brilliant green bead inlaid in a white jade. Wonderful! Xiao Hua is vexed. Seeing such a refreshing scenery, he unconsciously claps his hands and praises. Then, looking at the clear hot spring, he really has the impulse to take a bath. Let's go and wash. Perhaps my mind can calm down a bit. Xiao Hua's figure descended. Standing at the edge of the hot spring, he shook his head, as if he wants to shake off the depression in his heart. Roar! At this moment, a tiger's roar suddenly came from the distant mountain path. Then, a gust of wind blew, causing Xiao Hua to wrinkle his brows. When he raised his eyes to look at the foothills of the mountain about several zhang away, a white tiger of several feet in size stepped on the snow and rushed over. Wherever its 4 hooves passed, huge plum blossoms fell on the snow one after another. Seeing that it is just an ordinary white tiger and has not become a spirit, why would Xiao Hua be afraid? He also didn't release any pressure or Buddhist sense. He only stood there and coldly watched. Who would have thought that the white tiger would fiercely rush over? Its fierce and dignified tiger eyes swept over Xiao Hua. It only stared at him for a moment, then unexpectedly shook its head and wagged its tail as it walked to the other side of the hot spring. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed several stalks of spirit grass growing on the side of the hot spring. Then it used its claws to wipe its big mouth. Like a cat, it rolled a few times on the other side of the hot spring. Then it stuck out its tongue and licked a dozen or so drops of congealed hot spring water on the spirit grass on the left side. Then it actually roared a few times at Xiaohua. It cheerfully explored some kind of rhythmic pace and quickly walked away. Xiaohua, who was standing at the edge of the hot spring, was somewhat stupefied. In his eyes, these ferocious beasts, which one of them wasn't vicious? Which one of them didn't pounce on a person when they saw him? Which one of them didn't want to feast on a cultivator's blood essence? This white tiger in front of him, could it be that its nature has changed? It doesn't eat meat anymore. It doesn't want to drink blood anymore. Paradise! Paradise! Suddenly, Xiaohua was somewhat enlightened. A person's paradise naturally has no sorrows, no worries, and no worries about life and death. Although there might not be such an extreme paradise under the Buddhist sect, beasts don't eat humans, and humans don't eat meat. I'm afraid it's possible to achieve one or two. If the Buddhist sect really has such a great ability, then what can I do even if I shave? Xiaohua had heard a lot of Taoist slander about the Buddhist sect on the Xiaoyu continent and the hidden immortal continent. He also saw the Confucian cultivators' disdain for the Buddhist sect, and even more so, he saw Frost Bamboo's cunning and Xing Chen's hypocrisy. He already had a prejudice against the Buddhist sect in his heart. Now that he suddenly saw the old monk's piety and the white tiger's obedience, he couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. He even had the thought of using other people's stones to polish jade. But when it came to the crucial moment, shave, there was still a knot in his heart. What he wanted was the Buddhist sect's cultivation method, not the Arhat's cultivation method. But if he didn't shave, he wouldn't be able to obtain the Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques of the exquisite temple. Of course, Xiaohua could also obtain the Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques from other places, but hadn't the exquisite temple's Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques been waiting for him for 10,000 years? How could Xiaohua not feel conflicted? Xiaohua, who was struggling in his heart, took off his clothes and fell into the pool with a plop. The temperature of the pool was just right, and the depth of the pool was just right. Xiaohua, who poked his head out of the pool, let out a long sigh. A kind of comfort that came from the surface of his body slowly seeped into his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. Along with this kind of comfort, Xiaohua's soul felt like it was about to fly out. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the mist lingering in the air. Xiaohua's mind was completely blank. This blankness only lasted for a moment. Suddenly, Xiaohua's body shook. His slightly narrowed eyes suddenly opened, and a light green brilliance appeared between his eyebrows. It instantly covered his entire body, and then rushed into the pool and into the stone wall of the snowy mountain. Xiaohua's open eyes gave birth to a kind of clarity. That clarity was like a clear mirror pouring water over Xiaohua's heart. Not only did Xiaohua's eyes seem to have torn away a thin layer of gauze, even his heart seemed to have torn away all the filth, and his heart became much brighter. What's going on? Xiaohua was greatly shocked. This Xiao's Dao foundation hasn't stabilized yet. Could it be that it's the effect of forming a nascent soul? Xiaohua. While he was puzzled, a faint voice sounded in his mind. This voice was filled with joy, and even carried a trace of trembling. Hearing it, Xiaohua felt his heart tremble. Who is it? Xiaohua was stunned. If it was Little Yellow or Little Black, they wouldn't call him. Moreover, they would only talk to him in his mind after entering the space. Little White. Xiaohua even took a moment to wake up. After all, Little White almost never took the initiative to communicate with him. Today was the first time. Almost without thinking, Xiaohua hurriedly rushed his mind to the mysterious dark clouds. At this time, the mysterious dark clouds were different from before. Now, not only were the heavenly marks and earth deeds deeply engraved on the surface of the mysterious dark clouds, the green aura entwining the heavenly might had become much denser. Above this green aura, there were many golden threads. These golden threads would overflow from time to time within the green aura, flickering with the intensity of the green aura, as if they were breathing. In addition, the lightning between the heavenly marks and earth deeds had also become much thicker. Those broken threads were even more connected, strand after strand. Some were dense, some were thin, but each strand seemed to have endless power. Last time, Xiaohua had already tested the powerful aura of the Great Desolate Era within these broken threads. Now that the broken threads were so complete, how could Xiaohua dare to try again? Quickly come in. Little White urged again from within the mysterious dark clouds. Xiaohua, who was standing outside of the mysterious dark clouds, could sense Little White's urgent breathing and dragon roar. Chapter 3398. Jade Archive. Xiaohua was even more surprised. If Xiao Bai's soul cultivation had improved, Xiao Bai would definitely not be so excited. There must be some kind of mutation in the ninth heaven of Ling Yuan. When Jade Archive, Xiaohua flew into the mysterious dark clouds, the lightning on the surface of the dark clouds flashed, and the broken threads also swayed. The difference was that Xiaohua deliberately avoided the aura of desolation, but it still uncontrollably attacked Jade Archive, Xiaohua. Of course, Jade Archive, Xiaohua did not care about these attacks at this time. His figure disappeared into the mysterious dark clouds. When he flew into the Immerse sky, he saw that the whole Immerse sky was brilliant. Thousands of green seal characters sometimes gathered and sometimes dissipated. When they dissipated, each green seal character was like a speck of particles. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning swayed between these particles. When they gathered, they emitted a power that shook the earth and mountains. The huge mountains and rivers were faintly discernible, just like a boundless world. Good. Jade Archive Xiaohua could not help but praise, looking up at the sky above the Immerse sky. Previously, Xiao Bai had said that there was a seal on the upper level of the Immerse sky, which made Xiaohua depressed for a long time. Later, Xiao Bai said that he was wrong. Now, it seemed that Xiao Bai must have made a new discovery. When the Jade Archive, Xiaohua flew past the countless soul threads that resembled a jade green ocean. An incomparably huge dragon body was coiled in the sky above the jade green ocean. Above the jade green ocean, there was an enormous grayish-black dark cloud that was as heavy as a mountain. This dark cloud seemed to be connected to the surface of the mysterious dark cloud. There was lightning and broken threads. The only thing missing was the heavenly runes and earth deed of the heavenly might. These dark clouds were also like solidified waves. A terrifying aura was emitted from the inside. Even Jade Archive Xiaohua could not help but feel a chill. This Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at the dark clouds with some surprise. This should be the fifth layer of the ninth heaven of Ling Yuan, the channel formation sky. But why was this layer so different from the other four layers? Fellow Taoist, please follow me. The soul cultivator Xiaohua appeared next to the Jade Archive Xiaohua. After raising his hand in salute, he flew towards the dark clouds. Puzzled, Jade Archive Xiaohua followed soul cultivator Xiaohua into the sky. Before long, they had reached the edge of the dark cloud, where there was an enormous space. This space was gray and misty, and strands of dark green light wandered beneath soul cultivator Xiaohua's feet. Large green seal characters were constantly bursting out from within the light. Oh, this is the same as the previous fourth heaven. Jade Archive Xiaohua seemed to have understood something. He nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist, what you mean is that outside these dark clouds is the condensed meridian sky." Then were these dark clouds. Even as he spoke, Whitey's enormous draconic body flew over. Green light flashed around its body, and a Xiaohua that looked exactly like the soul cultivator Xiaohua appeared in front of him. Jade Archive Xiaohua was stunned. It seemed that Whitey had never transformed into his original appearance. How could it do so today? Jade Archive Xiao Hua couldn't help but cry out. How can you transform into Ai's appearance? You're a soul, not an ordinary body. Heh. Xiao Hua's smile was far more brilliant than the soul cultivator Xiao Hua's. Proud and excited, he shouted, Xiao Hua. Of course, this poor Taoist knows that. Not only are people's souls different, but it's also impossible for two identical souls to exist in this world. Furthermore, this poor Taoist isn't a human, and his soul is even more different from humans. There's no way this poor Taoist can take on a human form that looks exactly like you. But I can transform into you now. Also, look at him. Doesn't he look a little different from before? With that, Whitey pointed at Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua's gaze fell on Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's face, Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's rigid face suddenly blinked at Whitey, and then the corner of his mouth slightly rose, unexpectedly smiling. Jade Archive Xiao Hua was stunned. Smiling bitterly, he cupped his hands towards Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and said, Congratulations, fellow Taoist. Now you're even more like I. Fellow Taoist, what kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd? Why are you still hiding it from I? Heh. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua laughed and said to Whitey, This is all thanks to fellow Taoist. You should ask him. Hurry up and transform back. Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at Whitey, who was winking at him, and helplessly scolded. You are you, I am me. Is it fun for you to transform into my appearance? Haha, yes, it's fun. Little white Xiao Hua laughed heartily. He pulled Jade Archive Xiao Hua's hand and said, Come with me, I'll show you something interesting. After transforming into Xiao Hua, Whitey's personality seemed to have changed. He was much more quick-witted than before, which made Jade Archive Xiao Hua quite happy. The three identical Xiao Huas flew over the mountain-like dark clouds and arrived at a very ordinary place. Whitey smiled and said, Xiao Hua, take a look. What's different about this place? Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked left and right, but couldn't see anything different. Shaking his head, he said, I can't see anything different. I knew it. He definitely can't see it. Whitey laughed and clapped his hands, looking at Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua said unhappily, If I can't see it, he can't see it either. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and a strand of soul flew out of his mouth. Whoosh! A dark green light flashed, and a dozen or so strands of soul came out of the dark cloud. Xiao Hua, come with this poor Taoist and take a look. Whitey rushed over and landed right in the middle of the soul strands. Its entire body once again transformed into its dragon form. As soon as the soul strands were retracted, Whitey immediately disappeared into the dark clouds. The lightning and the broken strands did not stop it. Oh! Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked at Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and asked, Can it be that we can only enter through these soul threads? Are the other places the same? Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua nodded. That's right. Whitey has been hovering under the dark clouds for many days, and only then did he discover the secret inside. You'll know everything once you enter. Okay. Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't ask any more questions. His body floated up and landed in the middle of the soul threads. The soul threads were like antennae, and Jade Archive Xiao Hua immediately entered the dark clouds. The surface of the dark clouds was the same as the layers of the 9 heavens of spirit origin. They were all made of soul threads, but the soul threads here were somewhat black and mixed with lightning. When Jade Archive Xiao Hua passed through the surface of the dark clouds, his vision turned dark. This place was different from the 9 heavens of spirit origin. However, when Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked up again, there was a faint light of the moon and stars in the darkness. Borrowing this light, Jade Archive Xiao Hua saw that this was a curved space. Xiao Hua, come up. Whitey's voice came from the top of the space. Jade Archive Xiao Hua obeyed and flew up. It was very strange. This space was different from the 9 heavens of spirit origin. One didn't need to rely on the depth of a soul cultivator to fly high. Moreover, as Xiao Hua flew higher, the space around him became bigger and bigger. After flying for a while, Jade Archive Xiao Hua still couldn't see White E's figure. However, waves of coldness inexplicably emerged from the surroundings. This coldness was like a cold wind blowing on Jade Archive Xiao Hua's body, making his muscles and bones weak. Moreover, after flying for a while, Jade Archive Xiao Hua felt even more limp and numb, making Jade Archive Xiao Hua feel very uneasy. How is it? White E's dragon body appeared about 10 zhang above Xiao Hua's head. Do you feel like you're going to be blown away? Indeed, Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't hide it. If I fly any higher, I won't be able to bear it. Look at that place again. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua also flew up and pointed his finger at a distant place. In the night sky, which looked like the mouth of a well, there were 2 faint green lights. One was like a half moon, the other half was blocked by the edge of the night sky, and the other half was a complete star shape. Spirit, looking at the moon's shape in the distance, Jade Archive Xiao Hua felt something and nodded. This is the green seal character, Spirit. That's also the green seal character, Spirit. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua didn't find it strange. He pointed at the green seal character that looked like a star and said, "This should also be one of the 9 heavens of spirit origin, but I don't know why it's so strange." "It's more than strange," Whitey hurriedly said. "It's simply strange." "All right, Xiao Hua, do you remember when I told you that your meridian condensing heaven might be sealed?" I naturally remember." Jade Archive Xiao Hua nodded. At that time, I had a feeling of oppression, an intuition that I couldn't break through the barrier between the 2 heavens. But I could. I tested it a little with him and found that although there was an extremely oppressive feeling, the barrier between the 2 heavens could still be broken through. That's why I told you that I was wrong. Indeed, Jade Archive Xiao Hua seemed to have understood what Whitey wanted to say and nodded with a smile. But when I followed him to the meridian condensing heaven, there was this dark cloud above our heads. All the oppressive, dense, and sealed feeling from before came from this dark cloud. Whitey explained again, "I stayed here with him for a long time, but I couldn't find the secret inside. Therefore, he went to cultivate and comprehend the bone joints, and I searched here. I don't believe that there's something in this world that I don't know." Whitey's, I was extremely similar to Xiao Hua's. Jade Archive Xiao Hua almost laughed out loud. "But I searched for a long time, but I couldn't find it. But just a few days ago, the entire dark cloud suddenly boiled and swelled, and an extremely bright light of the stars, and the moon came from the place where we came in," Little White said proudly. As such, I hurriedly flew over and found that there was a crack there. Just as I arrived, the crack started to shrink, and by the time he arrived, the crack had already disappeared and not a single hole could be seen. Fortunately, he could use the soul strands to guide the soul strands out, and when I touched those soul strands, my whole body immediately shrank and was pulled in. Hee. After I came in and was illuminated by the light of the stars and the moon, I could transform into your appearance. Chapter 3399. I can also smile now. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua also said with a smile. Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned as he listened, then looked up at the 2 spirit characters in the sky. He seemed to have thought of something and said in a low voice, "Previously, I remembered that there was a saying of 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls in this world, but when it comes to soul cultivators, there are only 3 spiritual souls and 6 physical souls left. The 9 heavens of spirit origin has 9 layers, and this layer is probably the hidden layer, right? There are 2 spirit characters in this layer of heaven, which should be the 2 characters of Yin and Yang. It should be called the Yin-Yang spirit sky. This layer of heaven has stars all over the sky, so it's also very good to call it Star Splendor Heaven." Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua suggested again. Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't care about the name of this layer of heaven, but he asked curiously, However, within the 6 heavens of Spirit Soul, there are 50 green seal characters in each layer. Why is there only one in this layer of heaven? Could it be that this is one of the 12 missing green seal characters? Soul cultivator Xiao Hua also frowned. I'm afraid so. Jade Archive Xiao Hua nodded. This spirit character is not simple. When Little White arrived here, he could use his spirit to transform into a spirit soul, and fellow Taoist also has a spirit. As for I just now, I also felt as if I was enlightened. The reason why my human race is the spirit of all living things is probably because of this double spirit sky, right? Extremely so. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua said with a smile. Others who cultivate the 9 heavens of spirit origin can't see the situation of each layer of heaven, so they naturally can't sense this star splendor heaven. As for our opportunity, Little White really found this place based on his feelings. That's right, it's an opportunity. Jade Archive Xiao Hua sighed. The vibration just now was probably because I advanced to the nascent soul stage and caused a phenomenon in the sky. This double spirit sky had its own changes, so Little White discovered something strange, right? This is Xiao Hua's opportunity, and also the opportunity of all fellow Taoists. At the same time, it's also I's opportunity. Little White said with a smile. When I flew in, there was a lot of heaven and earth spirit energy abnormally abundant. Moreover, the starlight in this heaven and earth spirit energy was very bright, flashing like fluctuations. Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled and said, I formed the nascent soul in my lower dantian and attracted the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The double spirit sky should be able to sense it. However, the soul cultivator Xiao Hua said, that day in the void, there were only fluctuations. It was more like the fluctuations attracted the star power, which was why the heaven and earth spirit energy was produced in star splendor heaven, right? Left and right are the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. One of you is called the first stage of the spirit heaven, and the other is called the star splendor heaven. Don't you think it's boring? However, I feel that this place is different from the other heavens. Little White was disdainful of the disagreement between the two and grinned. The bottom of this place is extremely narrow, almost inaudible, and the top is extremely wide, like a tree root deeply rooted in the ground. How can you still call it heaven? Hearing this, Jade Archive Xiao Hua thought about the Bodhi tree next to the exquisite temple. Wasn't it made up of many branches twisted together? And how many roots had penetrated into the foothills? Thinking of this, Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said with a smile, if that's the case, why don't we call it spiritual root? No, it's too vulgar. It doesn't sound as good as star splendor heaven. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua immediately objected. Besides, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here is much more than spiritual light. If you want to call it spiritual root, you have to call it spiritual root. Io, hearing soul cultivator Xiao Hua mention the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly became happy again. He clapped his hands and said, what fellow Taoist said is right. Just as I advanced to the nascent soul stage, there is spiritual energy of heaven and earth here. In other words, I can rely on whether or not this place can sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and then judge whether or not others can sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and then judge whether or not they can cultivate my Tao sex cultivation method. Fellow Taoist, if this place isn't called spiritual root, then what is it called? Forget it. Do as you wish. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua couldn't stand Jade Archive Xiao Hua said, you have the final say. If you call it spiritual root, then it is spiritual root. If you call it spiritual aura heaven, then it is spiritual aura heaven. If you say you can judge whether or not a cultivator can cultivate, then you can judge whether or not others can cultivate. It has nothing to do with I. Don't. Jade Archive Xiao Hua pulled Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua and said, how does it have nothing to do with you? I am Xiao Hua, and you are also Xiao Hua. With me, Xiao Hua, in this world, who dares to bully and humiliate the Tao sect? You also have a part of the responsibility here. How about this? You carefully think about whether or not you can find a cultivation method to judge whether or not a mortal spiritual root can sense the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. How about it? I hear. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua was about to refuse, but looking at Jade Archive Xiao Hua's smile that wasn't a smile, he said very dejectedly, "All right, since I Soul Bridge and that green seal text called Cleansing Heaven and Washing Earth have already been practiced, I will help you take a look. Many thanks, fellow Taoist." Xiao Hua bowed and said, "When I's nascent soul is formed, I will ask fellow Taoists to go out for a walk." This is what fellow Taoists said. "I want to be the first to go out and take a look." Soul cultivator Xiao Hua unexpectedly laughed like a little fox. Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly had a feeling that he had fallen into a trap. Humph! Jade Archive Xiao Hua pretended to snort coldly. How effective is that green seal text of Cleansing Heaven and Washing Earth? I will let fellow Taoists know. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua said with a smile, "This green seal text is like lightning, thunder, clouds, and rain. It is precisely used to break all the talismans of soul cultivators in the world. If you practice it to a profound level, any kind of imprisonment, any kind of seal can be broken." Good. Jade Archive Xiao Hua's face had a slight smile, and he said again, "Actually, the discovery of spiritual roots doesn't mean anything to you and me, but it has a great impact on the development of the world's Tao. Now that the spiritual aura of heaven and earth has changed greatly in the Dawnrain continent, all the Tao of disciple selection is ineffective. If we can rely on the spiritual root to select a disciple, you and I will have done a great deed." Yes, I understand. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua seemed to have sensed Jade Archive Xiao Hua's displeasure, and he hurriedly said with a smile, "Right now, we are only at the spiritual root. So what do the tree trunks, branches, and leaves look like?" While Jade Archive Xiao Hua and Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua were talking, Little White was not interested. It just raised its head to look at the starry sky, looking at the two spirit characters, and muttered to itself, "I really want to fly up and take a look." Little White, Jade Archive Xiao Hua said with a smile, "Since the spirit character is an incomplete green seal text, it must be hidden in a dangerous place. Right now, our cultivation is limited, and it is not enough to get close to the green seal text. In the future, when our cultivation deepens, we will definitely be able to go and take a look one day." Alas! Unexpectedly, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's comforting words did not make Little White smile, but instead made it sigh. "I actually envy you humans. Just the soul alone contains such a great mystery. I really don't know how you humans obtain the favor of heaven and earth. And my soul doesn't seem to have such a mystery." Little White's sigh naturally made Jade Archive Xiao Hua think of the debate he had with A.O. Shuai and old monster Jifeng about who is the wisest of all living things. Whether it is a human, a demon, or even a spiritual flower or spiritual grass, they're all the heavenly bell. They all have their own value of existence, and each has its own strengths and weaknesses. Everyone is a spiritual object of heaven and earth. So why should we care about who is the wisest of all living things? Jade Archive Xiao Hua could only put it this way. Little White was not like old monster Jifeng, so Xiao Hua could only compromise. Unexpectedly, Little White shook its head slightly and whispered, "Xiao Hua, you are still wrong." "I am wrong." Jade Archive Xiao Hua stared blankly, somewhat unable to understand Little White's words. "Where did I go wrong?" Little White shook its head again and said, "I only envy the souls of the human race. Envy that the human race has the heavenly bell. But this kind of envy is only envy, and it is limited to the soul. Compared to my demon race, the difference between the human race and my demon race is not just a little bit. To be honest, in my eyes, the human race can only rely on their spirituality to compete with my demon race. Everything else is useless." Sweat. Jade Archive Xiao Hua did not expect Little White to be as arrogant as old monster Jifeng and Ao Shui. Its tone just now was just jealousy, not envy. He could not help but smile bitterly. My human race? Are you still a human? Little White did not wait for Jade Archive Xiao Hua to finish speaking and asked with a smile. Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled even more bitterly. Last time when they surrounded the fire dragon's soul essence, Little White already knew too many of his secrets. If he really forced himself to say it, he really could not be considered a complete human. Actually, the most terrifying thing about the human race is their ability to reproduce. Little White looked at Jade Archive Xiao Hua, knowing that he had nothing to say, and continued. In my memory, when I first arrived at Yellow Flower Ridge, there were not many people nearby. But what happened later? Although the population of Yellow Flower Ridge had withered, how many people from the secular world would appear within a 1,000-li radius? In my demon race. Ouch! I seem to remember something. At this point, Little White's face changed slightly and suddenly turned into a huge dragon rolling in the spiritual root, no longer paying attention to Jade Archive Xiaohua. Fellow Taoist, there seems to be an old monk peeping at your bath outside. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua reminded with a smile. You'd better go out quickly. Don't let your spring scenery be exposed. Alas, Jade Archive Xiao Hua ignored Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's laughter and sighed. You should know the cause of this matter. This old monk wants I to shave my head and become a monk. Although his tantra does not prohibit meat and fish in marriage, I am still a Taoist disciple. How can I become a monk at will? Future Buddha, just listen to it. It's very arrogant. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua instigated. Why don't we play with future Buddha's orthodoxy? Fellow Taoist, you now have so many fellow Taoists. Ouch, that's right. The Jade Archive Xiao Hua understood that Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's thoughts were exactly what he was thinking. However, because he was thinking too much, he didn't think of these details. This poor Taoist doesn't need to shave his head, but the Buddha's Saraira can shave it. That guy originally practiced Buddhism. He should be willing to shave his head, right? Farewell, fellow Taoist. Jade Archive Xiao Hua cupped his hands and retreated from the mysterious dark clouds. In front of him was the steaming hot spring in the snow. Xiao Hua was hesitating whether to escape or not, but he found the mystery of the spiritual root in the mysterious dark clouds, which delayed him. Now that the old monk of exquisite temple chased after him, how could he still have the face to escape? However, with the Buddha's Saraira as a scapegoat, Xiao Hua did not mind becoming a monk once. Chapter 3400. Looking at the old monk who was holding a strange yellow monk robe, Xiao Hua couldn't help but sigh. Just now he had been talking nonsense with Little White about the spirits of all living things. In fact, as a human, the most difficult thing for a demon to reach was the human heart. Only with a heart could one be benevolent, righteous, and virtuous. Only then could one have no regrets for one's faith. This kind of human nature was something that demons would never understand. From the exquisite temple to this pool, Xiao Hua only needed to fly. However, Xiao Hua also knew that along the way, not to mention the slippery snow and rugged mountain roads, even with the old monk's turbid eyes, it was already extremely difficult for him to reach this pool from the exquisite temple. Not to mention, the old monk's clothes were already covered in snow. Xiao Hua didn't know how long he had been standing here. However, the old monk's arms were very calm as he held the robe. The yellow hat was placed on top of the robe, and a string of prayer beads was placed beside the hat. His eyes were calmly looking forward. They had already passed through the water vapor and landed outside the cliff. From those turbid eyes, Xiao Hua could see the old monk's conviction and persistence. Although Xiao Hua didn't say anything, he believed that Xiao Hua was bathing in the pool. Facing such a heavy trust, Xiao Hua felt a rare kind of nervousness. It was as if this was a kind of responsibility. This responsibility made Xiao Hua feel even more restrained and uneasy than when he faced the strange insect in the void. Elder, please wait a moment. I will come up right away. Xiao Hua muttered to himself for a moment. He used his hand to lift up the hot water in the pool and symbolically wash his body a few times. Buddhist Lord, don't be anxious. A smile flashed across the old monk's extremely old face. He said, carefully bathing and washing away the dust in the body is also cleansing the mind. Using a pure mind is the foundation of Buddhism. Buddhist Lord spent so much effort and didn't slack off in the slightest. This is truly worthy of this poor monk's admiration. Sweat. A trace of shame appeared in Xiao Hua's heart. He originally wanted to get up, but now he could only be patient and properly wash his body. Although he didn't wash away any dirt, Xiao Hua felt that it was a blasphemy to the old monk's lofty faith. Looking at the monk robe in the old monk's hand, Xiao Hua waved his hand and the yellow monk robe flew into the air. After casually putting it on, it landed beside the old monk. This poor monk will help Buddha Lord change his clothes. The old monk felt the clothes in his hands fly away. After a while, he finally opened his mouth. Xiao Hua wanted to put on his own clothes, but this monk robe was different from a Taoist robe. It was even different from the monk robes Xiao Hua had seen before. It was very strange, so he didn't put on any pretense. He smiled and said, "Thank you, elder." When the old monk heard this, he beamed with joy. He looked at Xiao Hua with his eyes closed, and his hands trembled as he helped Xiao Hua put on his clothes. After half a meal's worth of time, Xiao Hua finally put on the monk's robe. When one of his arms came out of the monk's robe, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh of relief. He looked at the old monk who had also changed into a new monk's robe and asked, "Elder, you don't have to wear this monk's robe every day, right?" "Buddha Lord, don't worry. This is the Buddha Lord's formal robe. It can only be worn during my tantric sect's major celebrations. There's no need to wear it on ordinary days." The old monk smiled and said, "Moreover, my Shaolin Long Temple's lineage has always been small. When this poor monk passes away, there will only be one Buddha Lord. The Buddha Lord's status is honorable. Other than the current Buddha Lord, who else can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Buddha Lord in the past? If the Buddha Lord wants to wear it, he can wear it. No one can stop him. That's really free and unfettered." Xiao Hua smiled. The old monk proudly said, "Of course, my tantric sect has always been an anomaly in the Buddhist sect. In the eyes of others, it is full of mystery." "I understand." Xiao Hua smiled. It was funny but also a bit bitter. Just now, when the old monk was changing his clothes, he used his spiritual sense and true qi to check the old monk's meridians and body. He even used the Devil Realms technique to check his blood vessels. Just as the old monk said, the old monk was really at the end of his life. His meridians had long withered. The essence of his body was also dried up. His heart and blood vessels were abnormally old. Everything he did now was based on a kind of belief. The scene of the old monk lying on the ground was definitely not a coincidence. Facing such a body, even Xiao Hua's rejuvenation pill was powerless to bring him back to life. Alas, there is a limit to one's strength. It is indeed so. Perhaps only an immortal or a true Buddha Lord can let this old man live until tomorrow. Xiao Hua sighed. "Buddha Lord, please. This poor monk can finally shave the Buddha Lord's head." The old monk put his palms together and bowed in a very gratified manner. This is the most glorious moment of this poor monk's life. It is also the moment this poor monk has looked forward to for a lifetime. "Thank you for your trouble, elder." Xiao Hua used his monk robe to wrap the old monk. The two of them slowly flew up and flew towards Shaolin Long Temple. Although Xiao Hua was afraid that the old monk would not be able to take it and flew extremely slowly, he still landed in front of Shaolin Long Temple's main hall in a moment. Although the old monk could not see clearly, when his feet touched the ground, he felt the familiarity of the surroundings. He was not surprised and said with a smile, "Although Buddha Lord has not shaved his head, he actually has such divine ability. It is truly the fortune of my Tantric Buddhism sect. I do not dare. They are all insignificant Taoists. Compared to elders' cultivation, they are far inferior." Xiao Hua did not dare to be too arrogant in front of an old man like Dao Shan. He replied humbly, This poor monk's cultivation has just begun. It cannot be compared to Buddha, Lord, who has already cultivated for several lifetimes. Even if Buddha, Lord, is a senior cultivator in this life and does not understand Buddhism, as long as he enters my Buddhism sect, he will be able to find the good karma and good karma of that day. All Buddhism sect's cultivation can be traced. The old monk's seemingly careless words immediately made Xiao Hua feel greatly alarmed in his heart. That's right. Buddhism sect emphasizes reincarnation and cultivation. This hidden immortal continent, this Xiao feels so familiar. Although I have not found Lujin yet, I have not found Piamiao sect, but perhaps it is this Zhao's experience from my previous life. Xiao Hua's thoughts turned rapidly. Could it be that this Xiao is really... Alas, there is always only one truth in this world. Although Xiao Hua is already a nascent soul master, he is still so insignificant under the heavenly Tao. He wants to find his own origin from the confusing world of the human world. All kinds of traces, 1,000 layers of fog, always make him unable to find the way back on the wrong path. I know. The old monk raised his hand and pushed open the door of the main hall. He did not ask about Xiao Hua's cultivation. He did not even care if Xiao Hua was a Confucian cultivator or a Taoist cultivator. Perhaps he already regarded Xiao Hua as a lay disciple of Buddhism sect. Buddha Lord, please, the old monk pushed open the door. He did not dare to take half a step forward and said very respectfully. Xiao Hua was also not polite and stepped into the main hall. However, he was also somewhat nervous in his heart. He did not know what was inside this main hall. Xiao Hua naturally did not enter the main hall of Buddhism sect. However, he saw many Buddhist shrines and Buddhist statues in the ruins of Buddhism sect. Even in his memory, there was once a golden statue of Buddha. However, this Shaolin Long Temple was a branch of Tantra Buddhism. Moreover, it was built 10,000 years ago to wait for him, the so-called future Buddha Lord. How could Xiao Hua not be curious? The whole main hall was empty, but it was also abnormally clean. Xiao Hua raised his eyes and saw a 10-feet golden body. This golden body was abnormally fat, with a bare chest and a very warm smile on its face. What was special was that on both sides of its belly, which was bigger than 10 months of pregnancy, in its left hand was a small bag, and in its right hand was a thick prayer bead. Moreover, this golden body was casually lying there. It was not standing like an ordinary golden body of Buddha Lord. It was also not like when Xiao Hua first formed Buddha Sarairo with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the earth. This is the future Buddha Lord. Xiao Hua saw that the golden body of Buddha inside was not too different from what he had imagined. It was the same as what he had seen in the ruins of Buddhism sect. Unconsciously, his heart was slightly calmed, a kind of inexplicable calmness. In front of the golden body of Buddha, there was only an ordinary incense table. On it, 2 thick red candles were lit. In the middle of the red candles, there was a small fist-sized incense burner. On the incense burner, there were 9 red incense sticks, each as thick as a thumb. The incense burner was not big, so the 9 incense sticks had already completely filled the incense burner. At this time, it should be because the old monk had waited for Xiao Hua for too long. The incense sticks had almost burned to the end. In front of the incense table, there were 2 ordinary praying mats. Although they were somewhat old, one of them was particularly worn out. Before the praying mat, there was no Buddhist weapon such as a wooden fish. There was only a small box, half of which was covered by a bright yellow silk. When Xiao Hua stopped to look, the old monk had already shakily walked to the praying mat. He knelt on the praying mat, kowtowed, and recited, Namo Methriya Buddha, disciple kowtows to Buddha. Disciple has waited under the green lamp for nearly 100 years. Now, I finally welcome Buddha Lord's flesh in this life. Disciple is fortunate to be able to shave Buddha Lord's flesh today. May Buddha Lord send down the auspiciousness of 100,000 worlds to bless Buddha Lord's flesh. Disciple is willing to use my broken body to help Buddha Lord cross the tribulation in this life. Immediately, the old monk respectfully kowtowed 9 times with his head on the ground. His mouth was also chanting, And at this time, Xiaohua was once again bewildered. After a full half cup of tea's time, the 9 incense sticks finally burned to the end. The old monk raised his head, put his palms together, and said, Namo Mithya Buddha. Then he lifted his hand and lifted the silk covering the small box. When he opened the box, there was a bronze mirror and a simple razor inside. The old monk invited the razor out with both hands. He turned around and coughed. Bodhi, I am holding the blade for Buddha Lord today. Are you willing to abandon everything in the secular world and enter my Buddhist sect? Elder, Xiaohua walked to the front. He didn't want to hide anything and said, Although I cultivate Buddhist sect's exquisite leaf sutra, I was already a Tao sect disciple before practicing Buddhist sect's cultivation method. Moreover, my cultivation method is very complicated. If I say it, Elder may not believe me. Today, I came from hidden immortal continent, but I want to find a senior monk who knows the method of nirvana. I really came to Shaolin Long Temple to ask for directions. I didn't expect there to be so many surprises waiting for me here. Elder, let me shave my head and respect me as the future Buddha Lord. I can accept it. But this shave matter, just now when I was bathing, I already thought it through. I have already cultivated Buddha's Sarira. Elder, can you let this Buddha's Sarira replace me to shave my head and become a monk? Chapter 34:01 Exquisite Leaf Scripture. When the old monk heard this, he couldn't help but be startled. The razor in his hand trembled even more. A series of words came out of his mouth that Xiaohua didn't understand, the same tone as when he was praying. Xiaohua smiled bitterly. Elder, I came from the hidden immortal continent, so I don't understand the language of the Pure Land world. Elder, if you have anything to say, please speak slowly. Namo Mithya Buddha. The old monk let out a long breath and respectfully asked, This poor monk is really overjoyed. I lost my calm for a moment and let Buddha Lord laugh at me. Although my exquisite leaf temple is waiting for the arrival of the Buddha Lord. And, at the same time, we also prepared all the Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist secret techniques for the Buddha Lord, and even offered sariras as offerings, but the exquisite leaf scripture that the Buddha Lord cultivates is not included. The name of this Buddhist scripture is not even recorded in the Buddhist scriptures of the Pure Land world. It is only passed down by word of mouth in my exquisite leaf temple. The Buddha Lord has 9 lifetimes of fate to be able to practice this Buddhist scripture. So naturally, he is indeed the Buddha Lord that my exquisite leaf temple is waiting for. The old monk paused for a moment and took a deep breath as if he was calming himself down. Then he said, Buddha Lord, you have such an opportunity to cultivate Buddha's Sarira before shaving your head. But how can a Sarira shave your head? What? Buddha Sariras? Until now, the old monk was shocked as if he had just woken up from a dream. His shriveled lips trembled violently, and he could no longer hold the razor in his hand. He loosened his grip, and the razor fell to the ground. Xiaohua raised his hand, and the razor floated up, flying back to the old monk's hand. Then, a string of words that Xiaohua couldn't understand came out of the old monk's mouth. While speaking, the old monk knelt on the praying mat and kowtowed several times. Looking at the old monk's ecstatic appearance, Xiaohua's heart was both proud and happy. He was willing to bring hope to the old man, no matter how big or small. Seeing that the incense on the incense table was about to go out, Xiaohua hurriedly reminded, Elder, the 9 incense sticks in front of the Buddha are about to go out. It's fine. The old monk said in a relaxed manner. I was worried before the hot spring. I was even prepared to shave Lord Buddha's head before the candles went out. But now I have to shave Buddha's Sarira. Such earthly incense is no longer worthy. Let it burn out slowly. This is all Buddha's arrangement. As if he was afraid that Xiaohua didn't understand, the old monk explained, the razors of the secular world, the incense sticks of the secular world, they are all used to shave the body of a mortal. To shave the body of a true Buddha Sarira, that is something that only the eminent monks who have saved the Buddha's fruit, and even our Buddha has the qualifications to do. The incense sticks are definitely the colored glaze, fragrant oil of our Buddha's thunderclap temple. And the razors are also the severing mundane silk of our Buddha's thunderclap temple. Alas, this is all recorded in the Buddhist sect's ancient books. How many people are able to cultivate Buddha Sarira? Since he had cultivated the Buddha Sarira, how could he not have shaved his head? Compared to shaving one's body, shaving one's head for a Buddha Sarira surpasses how much. Lord Buddha has already abandoned his body before entering our Buddhist sect. This is truly worthy of celebration. Hearing this, Xiaohua really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was just being lazy and avoiding it, but it actually coincided with some of the Buddhist sect secrets. He rubbed his nose. He really wanted to tell the old monk that whether it was shaving one's head with a Buddha Sarira or shaving one's body, they were both just shaving. Buddhism equalized all living things, so Buddha Sarira and the body should also be equal. Unfortunately, Xiaohua couldn't say this to the old monk, who was a bit flustered. He could only wait until the old monk calmed down a bit. Or perhaps he wouldn't have the chance to say this to the old monk in this lifetime. This time it took longer than last time. Only then did the old monk's words become orderly. Lord Buddha, if that's the case, Lord Buddha's shave should actually be done in the Thunderclap Temple and personally presided over by the current Lord Buddha. Disciples' cultivation is shallow. If I were to shave Lord Buddha's head, I'm afraid I would provoke Lord Buddha's displeasure and affect Lord Buddha's cultivation. No matter, Xiaohua said with a smile. I know the Thunderclap Temple, but the Thunderclap Temple doesn't know me. I want to go find Lord Buddha, but Lord Buddha doesn't want to find me. If I can't shave my head because of this and affect my cultivation, Elder, wouldn't Lord Buddha punish you even more? Lord Buddha's words are reasonable. The old monk faintly smiled. My tantric sect and the future Lord Buddha and the Thunderclap Temple are all Buddhist sect branches. But after all, forget it, disciple won't say anymore. Disciple is now bold enough to shave Lord Buddha's head. Disciple naturally received good karma because of this. It's extremely beneficial to disciple's cultivation in the next life. Disciple thanks Lord Buddha for the gift. After saying that, the old monk respectfully bowed to Xiaohua again. Xiaohua smiled and raised his hand to help the old monk up, saying, Elder has been cultivating bitterly here for 100 years. Now is the time for this seat to repay you. This is what Elder should have received. If possible, this seat is willing to bring this honor to all the branches of Xilinglong Temple. Disciple represents my Xilinglong Temple to thank Lord Buddha for the gift. The old monk was overjoyed, trembling with joy. Originally, Disciple wanted to tell Lord Buddha clearly after Lord Buddha's head shave. Now that Lord Buddha has already refined Buddha's Sarira, Lord Buddha only needs to use the Sarira in the Buddha's head hall of my Xilinglong Temple. That will be the glory of my Xilinglong Temple. What? Xiaohua was shocked, almost inconceivably saying, Refining your Sarira is a gift to you? Is this the glory you've been waiting for? That's right. It's exactly so. Lord Buddha only needs to integrate these Sarira into Lord Buddha's Sarira. That will be the greatest gift to us. The old monk was very sure. After Disciple shave Lord Buddha's head, Disciple will go to the west. Lord Buddha, please cremate Disciple's remains and use the Sarira inside. Disciple can wait for Lord Buddha in this life. Help Lord Buddha shave Lord Buddha's head and then integrate the Sarira with Lord Buddha's Sarira. Lord Buddha's light will be able to refine Disciple's karma. Disciple will definitely be able to achieve Buddha's fruit with a karmic and unobstructed heart after reincarnation. So that's how it is. Xiaohua somewhat understood, but he still hesitated. This seat has never read Buddhist scriptures. Previously, I have also seen the cultivation method of the great strength Vajra Dharma body. It is a selfish act of swallowing other people's Sarira to strengthen oneself. Could it be that this seat's Buddha's Sarira is different from this cruel cultivation method? Naturally, there is an essential difference. The old monk smiled and explained, Lord Buddha only needs to look at the Buddhist scriptures at the side of the main hall to know the specifics. The great strength Vajradharma body is to cultivate the position of our Buddhist protector. It only borrows the power of the Sarira and does not eliminate the karma of the Sarira. Disciple doesn't know how much Lord Buddha knows about our Buddhist sect's Buddha fruits. Jalan, Venerable Heavenly King, Vajra, Arhat, Bodhisattva, and Buddha, these 7 kinds of Buddha fruits, except for Bodhisattva and Buddha, which can eliminate the Sarira karma and use the supreme power of Buddha's light to help people cultivate in the next life. The other 5 kinds of Buddha fruits can only borrow power like the great strength Vajradharma fruit. Not necessarily. Xiao Hua's suspicion immediately arose again. He couldn't help but secretly criticize. Sarira can help the cultivation of the golden body. This is known by all Buddhist experts. How many senior monks can cultivate Bodhisattva and Buddha? How many people can know the effect of this Sarira? Eliminating the Sarira karma and helping people cultivate in the next life. It may not be their words to scare people. However, seeing that this old monk was so pious, Xiao Hua didn't dare to say these words, especially to provoke him. Of course, Xiao Hua was only suspicious. He didn't study Buddhism and didn't have the secret technique to eliminate the Sarira karma. The Buddhist sect is a cultivation path that is on par with the Taoist sect. Who can say that they don't have this kind of magical power to help people cultivate in the next life? While speaking, the old monk's figure swayed twice, as if he couldn't stand steadily. Elder, Xiao Hua hurriedly supported the old monk and called out, Disciple doesn't have much time left in the mortal world. Lord Buddha, please take pity on Disciple and let Disciple have the honor of shaving Lord Buddha's Sarira into my tantra. The old monk hurriedly waved his hand, somewhat out of breath. Good. Seeing this, Xiao Huan knew that this was already the old monk's last wish. He also didn't dare to be negligent. He patted his forehead, and the Sarira came out of his Niwen palace. When the 4-chi long golden body held the clear water bottle and dressed in the 10,000 Buddha, painting stepped into the air. Amitba, Buddha, good. He chanted the name of Buddha, his face solemn and benevolent. Rumble. The heaven and earth shook, and the wind and clouds changed color. Where the wind and clouds swayed, a fierce wind rose. Wherever the fierce wind passed, the snow that filled the sky was blown into the sky, and the layers of dark clouds in the sky were cut down layer by layer in this fierce wind. The wind grew stronger and stronger, and it was as if there were small holes in the air for thousands of miles around. The seemingly endless power of faith poured out from these small holes, like a waterfall falling from the sky. Tens of thousands of streams surged and fell toward the inconspicuous little Linglong temple of the great snow mountain. This is... The old monk was shocked again, because as the power of faith fell from the sky, heavenly flowers covered the entire snowy mountain. Fairies wearing flawless heavenly clothes sat cross-legged on the exquisite temple, either playing the pipa or softly singing. The sound of nature filled the entire main hall. One after another, powerful sky dragons roared and swam around the mini exquisite temple. The effect of Nanwu Guanxian Bodhisattva in the Longevity Town was too shocking. Under the influence of the Buddhist sect's disciples, the worship of Guanxian spread uncontrollably throughout the entire hidden immortal continent. This pure power of faith should have slowly poured into Xiao Hua's Buddha relic. But because of the innate divine restriction, this power of faith was not collected by Xiao Hua in time, and had already condensed to a very terrifying degree. Now that the Buddha relic suddenly appeared in the Pure Land world, the power of faith naturally gathered together, and its momentum was naturally extraordinary, causing even more strange phenomena. Previously, when Xiao Hua took out the Buddha relic in the Black Cloud Ridge, the situation appeared like this. But fortunately, this was the Pure Land world, the Buddhist sect's mainland. Wherever the Buddha's light shone, there were many people who achieved the Buddha fruit, and this power of faith was indeed very eye-catching. The monks either knelt down to express their thanks, or rang the bell to celebrate, and no one came to disturb them. Chapter 3402. Woo! Similar to the spirit tide, the power of faith gathered to a certain extent and immediately turned into threads of crystal-like objects. These threads of crystal-like light flashed and fell into Xiao Hua's Buddha, Sarira. Every time a thread of crystal-like light flashed, the Buddha Sarira would slightly tremble. Moreover, as the crystal-like threads fell, the Buddha Sarira's body flickered with golden light and actually broke through the 4 feet restriction. It gradually increased in height until it reached 5 feet before stopping. The strange thing was that as the Buddha Sarira increased in height, the figures of the dancing fairies and roaring dragons from before actually gradually became blurry. When the Buddha's golden body reached 5 feet, it actually disappeared. Only the heavenly flowers were still fluttering around the snowy mountain. At this time, the strange phenomenon within the 10 million li radius had already converged to a 100 li radius. The dark clouds and snowflakes in the sky had all disappeared, revealing a bright sun. Perhaps because the snowy mountain was high enough, or perhaps because the sky here was pure enough, the sun was very dazzling. Under the sun, the pure, crystal-like threads of crystal-like silver light swayed and fell like swimming fish. Wherever the crystal-like threads passed, gusts of wind were also produced. The sound of the wind never stopped, as if the world was singing. This disciple is very lucky. The old monk's eyes seemed to also brighten. He trembled as he walked in front of the Buddha, Sarira, and bowed to the sky. This disciple really didn't expect Buddha Lord Buddha, Sarira, to already have a 5 feet golden body. Buddha Lord's enlightenment in this life will definitely come true. To be able to shave Buddha Lord's head and lead Buddha Lord into our Buddhist sect. This disciple is truly fortunate. Amitabha, the Buddha, Sarira chanted. Although its appearance was exactly the same as Xiao Hua's, the benevolence and compassion on its face was not something Xiao Hua could have. The golden body of the Buddha, Sarira, descended and stood right in front of the old monk. The old monk extended his trembling right hand and landed on the top of the Buddha, Sarira's head. He chanted, "People say that there are 3,000 worries. All of them are born from the heart and from the head. Cut off worries and let go of worries. Entering our Buddhist sect is joy. The body is an external object. Only the body can enter the mortal world. The mortal world is like the sea. The body is the boat. The Buddha's heart is the helm. Kindness is the shore. Cut off your worries and enter the sea of bitterness." Amitabha, as the old monk chanted, his hand landed on the top of the Buddha, Sarira's head. Boom! With a loud sound, the Buddha, Sarira's golden light brightened the old monk's turbid eyes. He seemed to see the golden body of the Buddha, Sarira. At the moment when the old monk's hand was about to leave the Sarira's head, his middle finger slightly trembled as if it twitched, wanting to touch the top of the golden body again. Amitabha! Amitabha! Suddenly, the sound of Buddha chants resounded throughout the entire main hall of the little exquisite temple. The old monk's hand gently moved away from the top of the Buddha, Sarira's head. He turned his head with difficulty and saw that behind the incense table, the golden body of the Methaya Buddha was also shining brightly. The sound of chanting was coming from within the golden body. This golden light was like a sword, and the chanting was like a bell. When it landed on the main hall, waves of blood-curdling screams rose one after another. At the same time, strands of black shadows also emerged from the left side. Within the shadows, the intertwining of the fairies and rakshasas were all destroyed by the golden light and the chanting. Up! The old monk covered his chest with one hand. A black shadow also flew out from his body, turning into a black fog and disappearing in midair. The old monk's body fell to the ground of the main hall again, motionless. Amitabha! Xiao Hua was shocked at first, but then he had some understanding. He had experienced Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's enlightenment in the Longevity Town. He knew that the old monk was naturally still the old monk, but when he revealed the golden body of the Buddha Sarira, he had already attracted the heavenly demon. The old monk originally did not have any cultivation, so he was afraid that the heavenly demon had taken advantage of him in an instant. Just now, the heavenly demon probably wanted to have evil thoughts about him, but just happened to encounter the golden body of the Maitreya Buddha that was enshrined in the little exquisite temple, so it was defeated. Xiaohua had some understanding, but Xiaohua did not know. The Buddhism sect was not like the Taoist sect, and the old monk was not like Daoshan. The Buddhism sect did not need to refine any Buddhism sect's cultivation method. As long as one chanted the Buddhist scriptures every day, even if one did not have the strength to truss a chicken, in front of the heavenly demon, they would be comparable to a warrior wearing full armor. It was impossible for them to be used by ordinary heavenly demons. Although the old monk had one foot in the grave, his life of faith was steadfast, waiting for the Buddha Lord to come. To the heavenly demon, he was simply invulnerable. However, why was the heavenly demon able to take advantage of the old monk's weakness at the last moment of his life? This was not something that Xiaohua could understand at this time. And what made Xiaohua even more surprised was that when the old monk fell to the ground, a black shadow with a wisp of arrogant laughter flew out from the old monk's body. Finally, a voice with a hint of unwillingness and anger flew out from the old monk's body. Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body. There is actually the cause of Namo, Maitreya Buddha. This is really beyond my expectations. Damn it, this is all the old bald donkey scheme. Today, I fell into your trap. So consider yourself Buddha is 1 foot higher. Maitreya Buddha, I will return. At that time, I will let you know what it means to be 10 feet higher than the devil. Xiaohua's corporeal body naturally didn't see this scene. His golden body, which was already 5 feet tall, but was almost completely empty inside, had long seen this scene clearly. The primordial spirit inside the Buddha's relic instantly understood and almost sucked in a breath of cold air. Buddha and devil are indeed everywhere. If there's good, there's evil. If there's light, there's darkness. This heavenly devil is so formless that it actually sneaked into my corporeal body before I achieved enlightenment. It even subtly eroded my physical body under its influence. I understand now. That day in front of Zhaixing Lu, if the original body's temperament was like before, it may not have had a further conflict with Duanmu Qiu. In Seven Yang Temple, it may not have been so ruthless to the mortal world's constables. Even in Black Wind Ridge, it may not have killed the Bat King and the Bronze Pillar Country's pursuers. All these subtle changes are all because of this heavenly demon. While the Buddha relic primordial spirit was pondering, the golden body of the Buddha above the exquisite temple shone even brighter, and the chanting became even louder. It was as if a golden sun was reflecting the white sun above their heads. The golden light rushed into the sun, and the remaining crystal threads and thousands of wild gales were attracted by the golden light. They rapidly descended, and together with the golden light, they all fell into the Buddha relic. Jia! The Buddha Sarira shouted a mantra. A golden Jia word flew out from the Buddha's mouth and rushed into the air. It turned into a tiny golden thread and disappeared. Xiaohua's Buddha Sarira slightly opened its eyes. It could already see clearly that the golden thread went to the place where the power of faith came from. This Jia word was just like what the old monk said before. It was the Buddha's Sarira borrowing its own power of Buddhism, using the future Buddha, Lord's merit, to repay the faith of the masses and redeem the Buddha in the sea of suffering. Good, Xiaohua sighed with emotion. The mysteries of Buddhism are indeed extraordinary. I was a bit stingy before. Just as the golden body of the Buddha's light dissipated, an item that looked like a fallen leaf flew out from the Buddha's Sarira and floated in front of Xiaohua's Buddha Sarira. Good. The Buddha Sarira raised its hand, and that item landed in its hand. It was a golden leaf. Needless to say, it should be one of the last 3 leaves of the exquisite Palette Sutra. Seeing this, Xiaohua was really overjoyed. Ever since he obtained the exquisite Palette Sutra in the Imperial Thunder Sect, he had always wanted to make up for the leaves on the exquisite pagoda. Unfortunately, even in the ruins of Buddhism, the Buddha's light of the Methria Buddha's golden body could not make up for all the leaves. Since then, Xiaohua had a premonition in his heart that in the Xiaoyu continent, where Buddhism was destroyed, he was afraid that it would be impossible for him to make up for the exquisite Palette Sutra. Later on, Xiaohua accidentally arrived at the hidden immortal continent. Xiaohua's long-cherished wish once again had a chance to be realized. Of course, the hidden immortal continent was still extremely far away from the Western Paradise. Xiaohua also did not have extravagant hopes that he would be able to obtain these last 3 leaves in a short period of time. Moreover, Xiaohua's cultivation in Buddhism had been steadily increasing. Even in the Buddha's Saraira, there were still mysteries that he himself did not know and could not comprehend. Therefore, he was not particularly anxious. He just wanted to go to the Western Paradise when the miscellaneous matters in the hidden immortal continent were settled. First, he would deal with the matter of Jiang Luer's death, and then slowly look for clues about the leaves. Now, through the vein of space, Xiaohua not only came to the Western Paradise, but also encountered the exquisite temple. This exquisite temple was waiting for his arrival. The leaves hidden in the golden body of the future Buddha of the exquisite temple were prepared for him. Wasn't this the legendary, wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort? At this time, Xiaohua no longer doubted his identity as the future Buddha. The Buddha's Saraira took the golden leaves and looked up at the clear sky outside the main hall. The sky was exceptionally blue. Looking from a main hall of the exquisite temple, it was particularly close. The Buddha's Saraira unconsciously sighed. Ba, every drink and every peck is predestined in the previous life. One cause and one effect, waiting for 10,000 years. With the help of the Buddhas, I will bear this kind of karma. I will use my karmic fire to refine the karma of the Buddhas and help the Buddhas achieve fruition. Before he could finish speaking, a myriad of Sanskrit chants resounded once again. The sound of copper bells also resounded, and they were struck a total of 81 times before they stopped. Come out! The Buddha Saraira waved its hand, and the Linglong Pagoda flew out from Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace. The golden light flashed and landed on the main hall. That piece of leaf turned into a golden lotus and fell into the pagoda. Kacha! There was a light and crisp sound. It was the Linglong Pagoda fusing into one. Come in. The Buddha Saraira pointed his finger again, and the exquisite pagoda's Buddha's light shone on one side of the main hall. The thick wall immediately turned into nothingness, and all the Buddhist scriptures and golden leaves fell into the exquisite pagoda, along with the Buddha's light. After collecting everything in the exquisite temple's Sutra Pavilion, the Buddha Saraira looked to the other side, and that was the pagoda where the Saraira was placed. Now, the Buddha Saraira had already built a 5-foot golden body, but the golden body was not full, and the lotus platform under his feet was still the 4th rank. The Saraira in the pagoda was indeed useful. However, after looking at the Buddha Saraira for a moment, and then lowering his head to look at the old monk who was already completely lifeless, he was rather hesitant. To be honest, Xiaohua did not have any special burden on the Saraira that did not have an owner. If he refined it, then he refined it. But these Sarairas were the Saraira of the Buddhas who had been bitterly cultivating in the exquisite temple for 10,000 years, waiting for him. If he refined it, he could erase the karma of these Buddhas and help them achieve fruition. Naturally, Xiaohua could refine it without any misgivings. But in the end, Xiaohua did not receive the guidance of the Buddhist sect's senior monks. Now that the Buddha Saraira had just shaved its head and became a monk, he really was not sure. Chapter 34:03. Forget it. This Xiao will take it first. Looking at the old monk lying on the ground with a serene face, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel heartache. This kind of thing had happened several times already, making him feel very uncomfortable. He always felt that in this world, good people rarely have good karma, and evil people live a long life. Army. In a trance, the Buddha's relic chanted the incantation, and the bowl-sized golden character fell on the old monk's body. Huh? The golden light dispersed, but the old monk's soul didn't come out. The Buddhist 9 syllables incantation didn't have any effect on the old monk, which made Xiao Hua quite surprised. Lin. Immediately after, the Buddha's relic chanted the incantation again, and, as Xiao Hua expected, the old monk's soul still didn't come out. Alas, the old monk bitterly cultivated for a lifetime, but in the end, he was still delayed by this king. Xiao Hua sighed, feeling that because he became a devil, he was implicated, causing the old monk's soul to be unable to escape from the hands of the heavenly devil. It seems that if this old monk wants to reincarnate, this king will really have to use the secret technique of the tantric sect to refine the old monk's relic. But how can I take out the old monk's relic? Moreover, if I want to walk into Pure Land, it will be troublesome if I don't understand the language here. Let's see what is recorded in the exquisite temple's Buddhist scriptures first. The Buddha's relic waved its hand, and a Buddhist light shot out, and the pagoda in the main hall was also absorbed into the exquisite pagoda. After the exquisite pagoda and the Buddha's relic were absorbed into the exquisite pagoda, Xiao Hua looked at the old monk lying on the ground and was very puzzled. The old monk might not be able to live until tomorrow, but after all, there was a big difference between him and his death today. The old monk should have a lot of instructions for Xiao Hua. These instructions could only be taught after Xiao Hua shaved his head. Now that the old monk was gone, Xiao Hua was once again in the dark. However, Xiao Hua was already used to this kind of exploration. He very familiarly had the Buddha's relic take out the Buddhist scriptures that had just been absorbed into the exquisite pagoda, and he himself put the old monk's corpse into the small universe bag, and slowly walked out of the main hall. The seal of overturning the sea above the Shaolin Long Temple had already been withdrawn when Xiao Hua entered the main hall. Now, the bright and dazzling sunlight shone directly into the small courtyard. The sunlight was extremely bright. Although Xiao Hua was not afraid, he still naturally stretched out his hand and cupped it against his eyes. Just now, he had come in a hurry and left in a hurry as well. He hadn't looked carefully. Now that Xiao Hua's gaze swept over the entire courtyard, he sighed even more. This Shaolin Long Temple was even more austere than the Seven Yang Monastery or even the Jiangchao Monastery. It seemed that other than the remnants of fire in the small hut, there were no other traces of people living here. Xiao Hua really didn't know how the old monk managed to survive here. After all, Xiao Hua didn't see any traces of Buddhist cultivation techniques on him. The sun was very bright. Standing under the sun, Xiao Hua didn't feel particularly hot. However, a very strange feeling came from Xiao Hua's skin. It was as if he was being roasted, and also as if the wind was blowing. However, there wasn't any wind at this time. The wind and snow from before had disappeared in an instant. 10,000 years ago, there was a senior from the Buddhist sect who set up this place, and even set up the Shaolin Long Temple here. Could it be that they were waiting for me? Xiao Hua naturally wouldn't be as pious as the old monk. His thoughts were very simple. Looking at this simple and crude temple, he frowned and pondered. If that's the case, then this Zhao's life experience is naturally within this senior's calculations. This Xiao has been too busy these past 10 days. I actually forgot. While thinking, Xiao Hua's mind immediately entered the space. He took out the map of the hidden immortal continent that he had obtained from the star-seizing tower. Without saying anything, he threw it to the green-robed Xiao Hua. The green-robed Xiao Hua continued to nag, but after being smashed by Xiao Hua, he immediately shut his mouth. He obediently took out the jade eyes and hastily checked it. Hey, it seems that the temptation is still very useful. Xiao Hua's mind withdrew from the space. He looked at the nascent soul sitting cross-legged in his lower dantian. He was very proud. This nascent soul was very popular at this time. Any primordial spirit that wanted to come out and take a look would use this nascent soul. Unfortunately, the nascent soul realm had not yet stabilized, and the nascent soul's body had not yet completely solidified. Otherwise, several primordial spirits would have already started fighting. Of course, if the entire nascent soul was completely solidified, it would only become a late nascent soul realm cultivator. However, for Xiao Hua's nascent soul with the Tao of the Heavens as its foundation and the green-robed Xiao Hua's secret technique, several primordial spirits, taking turns to control the early nascent soul to come out for a stroll, could not be considered a difficult matter, right? Xiao Hua's mind withdrew. Immediately, news came from the Buddhist Saraira. Xiao Hua slightly closed his eyes. Subsequently, he nodded and released his Buddhist sense. He found what he was looking for about 999 zhang to the west of the Shaolin Long Temple. Xiao Hua was about to use the cloud riding technique. However, just as he was about to move, he stopped. He turned his head and looked at the small house where the old monk was eating butter tea. He quickly walked over and took out a large wooden board. He placed it in front of the main hall. Then he took out the old monk's corpse from his small chincoin bag and solemnly placed it on top of the wooden board. Along with Xiao Hua's recitation of the rebirth mantra, a strand of Buddhist light once again emerged from the golden Buddhist statue and landed on the oil lamp. The worn-out oil lamp flashed with a trace of light, and a bean-sized flame appeared out of thin air from the oil lamp. Amitabha Buddha. Excellent, excellent. Xiao Hua's Buddhist sense was constantly released. However, he still couldn't find out how this flame was born. Xiao Hua couldn't help but sigh. The Buddhist sect's methods were indeed subtle. Xiao Hua held the oil lamp in one hand. The flame of the oil lamp didn't seem inferior in the daytime. Xiao Hua's other hand was holding the wooden board. The old monk's corpse was peacefully lying on top of it. When the sun shone on his body, it was somewhat holy. Even his bitter chrysanthemum face reflected an indescribable smile. Xiao Hua left the Shaolin Long Temple and walked towards the west side of the temple. The Shaolin Long Temple was located on a huge mountain range. The Shaolin Long Temple was located on the highest peak of the mountain range. Xiao Hua descended from the highest point of the Shaolin Long Temple. At this moment, he was walking along the mountain range of the Shaolin Long Temple. The path under Xiao Hua's feet couldn't be considered a mountain path. It was just some slightly chiseled stones. Moreover, these stones couldn't be seen clearly under the thick snow. However, the pious Xiao Hua stepped on the snow step by step. His feet emitted a zhi-zhi sound. This sound seemed to be the only sound between heaven and earth, causing Xiao Hua's heart to become increasingly calm. The further he walked, the stronger the wind above the mountain range. However, the flame of the oil lamp didn't seem to be affected at all. It didn't even sway. 999 zhang seemed to be very far, but after walking step by step, there would eventually be an end. At the end of the road was a small groove. Although there was some snow, under the mountain wind, the snow had already been blown thin, revealing the dark mountain rocks. If one looked carefully, they would discover that the dark mountain rocks were different from the color of the mountain rocks outside the groove. This darkness was in patches, clusters, and threads. It should have been caused by the fire. Xiao Hua's gaze fell on this place. His eyes revealed compassion. He already knew from the Shaolin Long Temple's Buddhist scriptures that this groove was the place where the monks of the Shaolin Long Temple were cremated. In the past 10,000 years, more than 1,000 Buddhist children had returned to the West. The Buddhist fire that burned their remains had burned the mountain rocks at the foot of the mountain into a black color. Xiao Hua respectfully walked in front of the groove. He carefully bent down and prepared to place the old monk's remains on top of the groove. At this moment, a rather indifferent Buddhist sense swept over from the distance. It was like a clear wave overflowing from the top of the Shaolin Long Mountain. Oh, this Buddhist sense came abruptly. Xiao Hua didn't have time to change his clothes. However, he frowned. As his thoughts flashed, he immediately used the appearance-changing technique. A face with a small nose and small eyes appeared. It was precisely Zhang Xiaohua's appearance. However, in just a moment, Xiaohua's idea changed again. The small nose became tall and straight, and the small eyes became big and spirited. He changed into another appearance. After changing his appearance, Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry. He simply placed the old monk's remains in the groove, put his palms together, and looked into the distance. However, although Xiao Hua was standing still, the Buddha's relic in his Niwen palace was busy. Just now, the Buddha's relic had roughly read through the Buddhist scriptures. Originally, it didn't intend to look at the records of the Pure Land's language. Now that it saw that someone was coming, Xiao Hua could only let the Buddha's relic quickly flip through the records. Who would have thought that after the Ling Chi sky was broken through, Xiao Hua's intelligence had undergone an earth-shattering change? Previously, he had spent a lot of effort to master the language, but in the time it took to eat a meal, he had already made progress. Xiao Hua's heart was wild with joy, and at the same time, he became more and more stable. Just when Xiao Hua was reciting and familiarizing himself with the language of the Pure Land's world, he heard a very unfamiliar roar of a beast. In the distance, a cyan cloud floated over like a cyan lotus. Above the cloud was a cyan lion several zhang in size. This cyan lion looked a bit strange. From head to tail, it had a pure cyan mane without any impurities. Even under its feet, there were 4 rather large cyan lotuses. That cyan lion looked very fierce. Its eyes, which were bigger than a fist, were flashing with cyan brilliance. Looking at the cyan lion again, a boy wearing a monk's robe was sitting cross-legged. The boy's lips were red and his teeth were white. His face had a kind of otherworldly appearance. The top of his head wasn't bald, but was instead clustered into 5 buns. On each of the buns, there seemed to be a golden token engraved with the golden body of Buddha. The boy wasn't empty-handed. In his left hand, there was a cyan lotus. On the long stem, there was a bowl-sized lotus that was blooming vigorously. The boy's right hand was holding a cyan sword. The sword was plain, and there was nothing special about it. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.